Chapter 119. The Marquis household was in a mess. There was no respect on the faces of the officers and soldiers. Instead, there was a faint murderous aura as they rushed towards a place. Wuxia followed behind the crowd. Just as she bypassed a pavilion, she saw her brother's study. She saw a dragon-scale guard come out with an inconspicuous box and shouted, "The guilty minister Yupinian colluded with the Western barbarians to usurp the throne. Now there is conclusive evidence. Men, arrest all of them. Colluded with the Western barbarians to usurp the throne. Wait, what's going on here?" Her brother was clearly shot into the river by the Western barbarians. His life and death are unknown. How did he become a guilty minister? And where did you find the evidence? If you want to condemn someone, you can always find a pretext. Wuxia rushed forward, wanting to snatch the wooden box. When her fingers touched the dragon-scale guard, everything in front of her instantly turned into smoke and dissipated in the air. The smoke drifted, scattered and gathered, condensing into another mansion. It was the magnificent Crown Prince mansion. The mansion was also in a mess. Many dragon-scale guards surrounded the Crown Prince's study. After a while, the Crown Prince came out with a miserable face. 2 dragon-scale guards pointed their halberds at his back. Then another person came out. It was the deputy commander of the dragon-scale guard, Ao Ping, her brother's most capable subordinate. He held a dragon robe and announced loudly, "The Crown Prince privately made a dragon robe, intending to rebel. Immediately take him to the prison to await trial." A group of dragon-scale guards swarmed up and took away everyone in the mansion. Wuxia stood in the same place and watched all this with a stunned expression. She only felt that her hands and feet were cold and her soul was torn apart. She desperately told herself that this was just a dream, but fear spread from the bottom of her heart until she was swallowed up. Ah! With a foul breath in her throat, Wuxia struggled to wake up from the dream. Tao Hong and Lulu also woke up. "Miss, what's wrong? Did you have nightmares again?" The two of them looked as if they were facing a formidable enemy. "I dreamed that the Marquis household was raided. The crime was colluding with Shi to usurp the throne. The Crown Prince mansion actually hid a dragon robe. Many dragon-scale guards wantonly arrested people. I am afraid that even cats and dogs would not be spared." Before she could finish, Lulu covered her mouth and asked in a low voice, "Miss, what should we do? Turn around and go back?" "No, you can't go back." Wuxia pulled her hand away and refused without hesitation. Her brother was waiting for her not far away. She couldn't leave her brother to die. "What about the Marquis household and the Crown Prince mansion?" Lulu asked with a pale face. Tao Hong was scared out of his wits. He hugged the quilt and shivered. In just 1.5 months, she felt as if the sky had collapsed. "Write a letter, then buy a fast horse and ask the monk to send it back. The Marquis household is fine. Once you say that the old lady will write a letter, what about the Crown Prince? You can't say that you had a dream, right? The imperial family is suspicious. Even if this matter is resolved, it's hard to guarantee that they won't treat you as an evildoer," Lulu said worriedly. Tao Hong jumped out of bed and rummaged through the package. He was dismayed to find that they didn't bring a brush, ink, paper, and inkstone. At this time, it was the middle of the night, and there was no place to buy it. In the corner of the room, there was a broom. Wuxia broke the branches on the broom and burned them with a candle. She then tore her underwear and laid it on the table. While writing, she explained, "I am an evildoer when I dream, and Master Kuhai's dream is a warning from heaven. Don't forget, he is the great Han divine monk. A casual Buddhist verse can cause countless people to kneel down and worship. This matter is urgent, so I will borrow his name. When this matter is over, I will definitely kneel in front of the temple and beg for his forgiveness." It wasn't that Yu Xiang didn't think of using obscure words to hint the crown prince to be more vigilant. However, her words carried little weight, and the crown prince probably wouldn't listen. Moreover, in her dream, she saw Ao Ping participate in this matter. Ao Ping was highly valued by the crown prince and Emperor Qing Kong. If she didn't expose Ao Ping's true colors, even if they avoided this disaster, the defenseless crown prince would still fall into his trap. Therefore, there couldn't be the slightest ambiguity in the letter. If she wanted to say something, she had to say it clearly and clearly. You plan to use Master Kuhai's name? This is a good idea. Lu Lu breathed a sigh of relief. Yu Xiang wrote while burning the branches. After half an hour, she wrote 3 letters. She rolled them into thin strips and hid them in the seam of the package. Because there were many people in the Crown Prince mansion, she was afraid that the letter would be stolen halfway. Also, because the matriarch had cut off all contact with her, she was afraid that she would burn the letter without even reading it. She could only ask the monk to give all 3 letters to Shen Yuanqi and let him pass the message. She and Shen Yuanqi had already agreed in the letter that they would never reveal her dream in front of the Crown Prince. With Shen Yuanqi's help, the Marquis household should be able to avoid this disaster. Early in the morning, Yu Xiang asked Lu Lu to buy a fast horse. She handed the package to the thinnest monk and let him take it back to the capital. Without hesitation, he marched into the boundless expanse of the forest. Ever since Mama Ma's advice, the matriarch had been living in anxiety. Several times, she walked to the door with the help of her crutches, stood there for a moment, and then turned back. In the end, she couldn't cross the hurdle in her heart. On this day, 2 fast horses rushed into the capital one after the other. One of them went to the imperial city, and the other one, which arrived 2 hours later, went straight to the Shen residence. Shen Yuanqi was on break. When he heard that the visitor was a monk from the Zhenghua temple, he hurriedly invited him in. That monk handed the package to Shen Yuanqi, touched the seam suggestively, and then took his leave. Shen Yuanqi couldn't wait to open the thread. He took out the 3 letters and read them one by one. His expression changed from anxiety to disbelief, and then to fear. Without waiting for him to return to his senses, the housekeeper quickly ran in and whispered the news of General Yu's death in the Wu River. It turned out that the first fast horse was an urgent report from Shijiang, bringing this bad news. Death in the Wu River. This scene was exactly the same as described in his younger sister's letter. At that time, his younger sister was in the capital, and the incident hadn't happened yet. Could it be that there really was someone in the world who could foresee the future? Or was it a warning from the heavens? Then the dream about the Crown Prince mansion and the Marquis Yongle being searched couldn't be disbelieved. Shen Yuanqi threw his letter into the brazier and burned it, then took the other 2 out of the door. Because of the importance of this matter, he couldn't delay. He first went to the Crown Prince mansion to ask for an audience. The Crown Prince and he had a close personal relationship. The 2 often got together, so they didn't attract much attention. When Shen Yuanqi asked for an audience, the Crown Prince had just returned from the palace. The 2 sat down in the study. The Crown Prince received Shen Yuanqi's hint and sent all the servants away. He asked in a low voice, "You came for Yifeng. But is Xiang worried? I have already asked Father Emperor to issue an imperial edict, ordering the army of Shijiang to search for Yifeng with all their strength. He is a valiant general who has never been defeated in 100 battles. He won't die in the hands of insignificant Shi people." Shen Yuanqi silently nodded. His fingertips were hidden in his sleeve, and he repeatedly stroked the letter. Finally, he took it out and said, "This humble one indeed came for Commander Yu, but not only for him. This matter is mysterious. I ask the Crown Prince to take a look." In the letter, Yu Xiang described the 3 dreams in detail, and then pushed all of them to Master Kuhai. He said that he had rushed to Shijiang with the mentality of, better believe it than not. On the way, he discovered that the dreams had come true. After thinking about it repeatedly, he decided to tell the Crown Prince the truth, so that the Crown Prince could be more vigilant. After reading it, the Crown Prince was silent for a long time. Ao Ping led the Dragon Scale Guard to search the Crown Prince mansion. The imperial robe was secretly hidden in the Crown Prince mansion. The evidence of treason was found in Yi Feng's study. Each of these incidents was simply too unbelievable, but they also seemed so real. Shen Yuanqi saw the Crown Prince's expression become gloomy. Just as he was about to open his mouth to comfort him, he saw the Crown Prince suddenly stand up. Ignoring the presence of outsiders, he opened the secret door behind the bookcase and rummaged through many of his private items. The Crown Prince's breathing was very heavy, like an injured beast that had no choice but to flee with all its might. After a short while, that heavy breathing suddenly stopped, and his rummaging movements also abruptly stopped. He slowly turned around, holding a brocade box in his hand. The lid of the box had already been opened, and a dazzling golden light flickered inside. It was precisely the bright yellow color that belonged to the imperial robe. Shen Yuanqi was dumbstruck, and it took him a long time to recover his senses. Good, when Yi Feng was in this mansion, even a fly couldn't enter. Once Yi Feng left, even such a dangerous thing unexpectedly entered this prince's study. The person behind this is truly remarkable. The Crown Prince sneered, a murderous aura faintly floating in his pitch-black eyes. He muttered to himself for a moment, then continued, Yi Feng's marquis household is strictly controlled, no less than the Crown Prince mansion. The person behind this was actually able to put these things in this prince's and his study. It can be seen that he has already bribed the most trusted people by our side. Once these words were spoken, he completely believed in the three dreams. Crown Prince, how should we deal with this item now? Shen Yuanqi's face was calm and composed, but his heart was secretly laughing bitterly. For the sake of his sister, he had no choice but to wade into this pool of muddy water. How to deal with it? Naturally, hand it over to Fu Huang. As for family Yu's side, don't report it. This prince wants to see what the person behind this actually wants to do. The Crown Prince closed the lid of the box and laughed coldly. What a good, the innocent knows they are innocent, and the muddy knows they are muddy. Rushing to secretly report to the emperor before the person behind the scenes makes a move, moving from being in the open to being in the dark, from being a prey to a hunter. Only the Crown Prince, who was deeply trusted by the emperor, dared to act so openly. Shen Yuanqi was relieved and reminded, if that person makes a move, the marquis household's women and children will most likely be implicated. If it weren't for his sister repeatedly asking him to take care of the matriarch and Wuxia, he definitely wouldn't have spoken. The women and children will be even more fine. Lord Shen, you may not know, but in the past, the old Marquis Yongle once used Imperial Grandfather's death exemption golden medallion in exchange for the promise that the crime won't affect the women and children. When this matter blows up, the Marquis household's family members won't be implicated. When this prince and imperial father uncovers the person behind the scenes, this prince will naturally clear Yi Feng's name. The Crown Prince thought for a moment and added, this matter also won't implicate Xiang'er and Master Kuhai. This prince will only say that he caught a spy by his side and was lucky to find out such a shocking secret. What letter, what dream, this prince has never heard of it. The search for Yi Feng also won't stop because of this. This prince will pass on the message, if he is alive, I want to see him, if he is dead, I want to see his corpse. As for Xiang'er, this prince will send someone else to look for her. This prince won't reveal anything that will damage her reputation. With this prince's arrangement, does the Lord Shen feel relieved? If you have any concerns, please speak. The Crown Prince's arrangement was so thorough that Shen Yuanqi had nothing to say. He immediately got up and took his leave. The Crown Prince was anxious and didn't urge him to stay. As soon as he left, he jumped on a fast horse and galloped toward the Forbidden Palace. Marquis Yongle, when the matriarch received the news that her grandson had died in Wu River, she had already fainted on the couch. As soon as she was woken up by Mama Ma, she began to bawl, it was I who harmed Yandere. If I had thought of his untimely death earlier, I definitely wouldn't have driven Xiang'er away. If I hadn't driven Xiang'er away, he wouldn't have met with this mishap. It's all my fault. As she cried, she beat her chest and stamped her feet. She pulled out the golden hairpin in her hair and was about to cut it on her wrist, and Mama Ma desperately grabbed her. Quickly go to the family Shen and bring Miss 3 back. Quickly go. She urged Wan Qiu repeatedly. Finally, she whispered into the matriarch's ear, "The old lady, how is this your fault?" Master Kohai said that the fate of him and his sister are opposite. If they live under the same roof, only one of them can survive. Master Ho wasn't harmed by you. He was cursed by that lone star. Chapter 120. The servants of the Marquis household found the family Shen and learned that Yu Xiang's leg injury had relapsed. He had been in the Zhenghua temple for more than a month. They immediately went up the mountain but were refused entry by the monks of the Zhenghua temple. They had no choice but to turn back. Not being able to bring Yu Xiang back, Matriarch Furen became more and more uneasy. She endured her illness and wanted to find him personally. As soon as she walked out of the door, she vomited blood and fainted. Subconsciously, she still had a glimmer of hope. She hoped that her grandson just fell into the Wu River and disappeared. As long as Yu Xiang came back, he would be safe and sound. Because of this obsession, even in a coma, she still kept chanting, "Go and find Xiang'er. Go and find Xiang'er." Mama Ma was afraid that her illness would worsen, so she pretended to send for a doctor. Wan Qiu and the others hurriedly carried her to the bed and then brought hot water to wipe her cold body over and over again. The Marquis household was in complete chaos. Yu Xiu hurried to the main courtyard. On the way, she met Yu Miaoqi, who was sitting by the lotus pond and leisurely playing with the fish and admiring the flowers. Her eyes couldn't help but turn red. "We don't know whether Big Brother is dead or alive. Old Ancestor is seriously ill. How can you still be in the mood to play?" "Why wouldn't I be in the mood to play? They never treated me as a member of the family. Why should I care about them? Whether they are dead or alive, let them be. These flowers, fish, and grass, you should stop and look at them a few more times. I'm afraid you won't have this blessing in the future." She covered her mouth and chuckled. Her eyes flashed with frightening malice. "What do you mean by this? What are you hinting at?" Yu Xiu was not as brainless as before. Especially when facing Yu Miaoqi, she used the most sinister guesses to guess her true intentions. "I'm not hinting at anything. Don't think too much. Go and see grandmother. She may not be able to make it." Yu Miaoqi giggled. "What nonsense are you talking about? Old Ancestor is very good. If your mouth isn't clean, I don't mind personally washing it for you." Yu Xiu had stayed in the countryside for more than half a year. She hadn't learned anything else, but she had learned the art of quarreling with village women. She quickly stepped forward, grabbed the back of Yu Miaoqi's neck, and pushed her head into the lotus pond. When their mistress brought Bao Sheng out, the Bao Sheng would be forced to be mute and sold. This matter had thoroughly chilled the hearts of the maidservants. As a result, Yu Miaoqi often had no one to serve her. At this time, she was alone and there was no one to help her. Yu Xiu was accompanied by 2 older maidservants. The 2 younger maidservants rushed forward and held her hands and feet down, making her unable to move. "Tell me, who's about to die?" What did you mean by what you said just now? What do you mean you won't have such good fortune in the future? What have you done?" Every time Yu Miaoqi was about to choke to death, Yu Xiu would pull her out and whisper in her ear. If she didn't answer, she would press her back down and torture her over and over again. Yu Xiu was indeed Yu Pinyan's biological younger sister. Her methods of extorting confessions by torture were not inferior to her older brothers. Yu Miaoqi's stomach was filled with muddy water. She only felt that her lungs were about to explode. She regretted provoking Wuxia too much. She should have known that family you people, regardless of whether they were male or female, were all executioners. Confronting them head-on would definitely not end well. But that person still hadn't made a move, so she absolutely couldn't let go. Otherwise, all her efforts would be for naught. Wuxia couldn't really drown Yumiaochi. After tormenting her for several minutes, she saw that Yumiaochi had already fainted. Only then did she release her bruised neck. She waved her hand and said, "Let's go. Let's go see old ancestor." She actually threw the dying Yumiaochi to the side of the road. When they arrived at the main courtyard, the matriarch was already awake. Her forehead was wrapped in a square handkerchief, and her eyes were filled with tears. Wuxia comforted her with a few words and truthfully told her what Yumiaochi had said. She asked, "Old ancestor, what do you think she means? No good fortune? Could it be that we can't live in this Marquis Yongle anymore? Does she know something?" The matriarch was greatly alarmed. She immediately spat out another mouthful of blood. Imperial Palace, Yangshin Palace Hall. Emperor Chengkang's imperial robe was placed on top of his desk. Today's weather was clear. The already brilliant sunlight illuminated the imperial robe until it seemed like it was about to ignite. The bright yellow flames set off Emperor Chengkang's face even more gloomy and frightening. They even managed to create an imperial robe and secretly send it to the Crown Prince mansion. What a good method! He praised, but his eyes were filled with murderous intent. No matter who the person behind this was, the power they secretly controlled had already crossed the bottom line that he couldn't tolerate. The Crown Prince remained silent. He understood that not saying anything at this time was the correct choice. Because if he didn't say anything, Imperial Father would naturally fill in everything he could or couldn't think of. In this way, it would appear that this person had committed an extremely heinous crime. 10,000 deaths would be a light punishment. They also placed something in Yifeng's study. What was it? Emperor Chengkang's tone was cold. Son doesn't know. Son only asked a few questions before he bit his tongue and committed suicide. Son didn't do a good job. Imperial Father, please punish me. The Crown Prince bowed his head, his face full of shame. It wasn't difficult to make a corpse that bit his tongue to commit suicide. This matter had already been done before the Crown Prince entered the palace. Moreover, it didn't alert the person hiding in the dark. No matter. Emperor Chengkang waved his hand. Someone will naturally report this matter to the imperial court. Go back. Take this imperial robe and put it back where it was. In the next few months, we father and son will have to put on a big show. The Crown Prince understood tacitly and secretly left the palace with the imperial robe. As soon as he left, Ao Ping led a scarred dragon-scale guard into the palace to seek an audience. Emperor Chengkang summoned him to the imperial court. It was Fu Fanqing, who often followed by Yu Pinyan's side. He could also be considered one of Yu Pinyan's trusted aides. Fu Fanqing knelt down with a thud and said, "Reporting to your majesty, Commandant, you colluded with the enemy and committed treason, intending to rebel." He described in detail how he accidentally discovered a clue and how he avoided being hunted down to report this matter to the imperial court. The entire process was extremely dangerous. Emperor Chengkang sat on the throne without saying a word. His face was expressionless. The hall was deathly silent. When Ao Ping and Fu Fanqing were about to collapse, Emperor Chengkang slowly opened his mouth. Ao Ping, take people to thoroughly investigate Marquis Yongle. If there are any abnormalities, immediately report to me. Ao Ping pretended to hesitate. When Emperor Chengkang's cold gaze swept over him, he bowed and left with Fu Fanqing. Emperor Chengkang sent all the palace servants away, leaving only his most trusted eunuch behind. Only then did he take out a handkerchief to cover his mouth and cough. After coughing, he opened it and saw that the bright yellow cloth was stained with crimson blood. As it turned out, Emperor Chengkang's illness had already reached its terminal stage and he didn't have much time left. That was why he boldly and decisively reformed the court, eliminated the aristocratic families, and supported the young talents to pave the way for the crown prince's ascension to the throne. Only a few eunuchs, imperial physicians, and a few other people knew about this. Even the crown prince and the empress were kept in the dark. Emperor Chengkang felt that his illness was getting worse. Since the beginning of the year, he had frequently handed over government affairs to the crown prince. He even gave half of the memorials to the crown prince to review. Although the crown prince was currently the heir apparent, he already had one foot on the throne. The mastermind probably couldn't wait any longer. Emperor Chengkang sized up the eunuch with a cold gaze. The eunuch was so shocked that he dropped the medicine bottle he had just taken out from his sleeve and knelt down to state his loyalty. "Get up. You grew up with me. I believe in you." Emperor Chengkang muttered, "If they didn't know about my illness, the mastermind wouldn't be so anxious and use so many hidden pawns and connections to set up such a murderous trap. Old fourth, old fifth, old sixth. Who was it that concealed themselves so deeply that they even schemed against my trusted aide and the crown prince?" Emperor Chengkang closed his eyes and thought for a moment. When he opened them again, they were filled with murderous intent. "Send someone to investigate Imperial Physician Su. Remember, don't alarm him. Just keep an eye on him." A dragon-scale guard suddenly appeared in the hall. His official robe wasn't the usual crimson, but black. He cupped his hands and accepted the order. It was as if he had suddenly appeared and then disappeared. The eunuch knelt on the ground and kowtowed heavily. He understood that although Emperor Chengkang said he believed him, his heart was already filled with murderous intent. Anyone who knew about his illness wouldn't be able to live after this matter. The matriarch spat out a mouthful of blood. She didn't want Mama Ma to call for a doctor. She repeatedly shouted, "Go open the Yandere's door and search all the rooms, especially the study. Go quickly." Her grandson had suffered a defeat. The imperial censor would certainly impeach him without restraint. However, he could be considered to have died heroically for the country. The emperor would only take into account the fact that the Marquis household was a family with 3 martyrs. At this time, if anyone wanted to completely overthrow the Marquis household, they would certainly fabricate a groundless accusation to frame her grandson. Since it was a framing, there would certainly be evidence. Where was the evidence? How did it get in? Connecting the dots with Yu Miaoqi's words, the matriarch suddenly felt as if she had been enlightened. Yu Pinyin controlled the Marquis household like a military camp. Even if the household lacked people, they would never buy them from human traffickers. The people they hired were all the children of the household. If a servant who had committed a crime was driven out, the entire family would be sold without any leeway. Even if Yu Miaoqi broke the rules when he was in charge of the household, the Marquis household seemed to be in a mess, but no one could take advantage of the loopholes. As for the poisonous dates incident, it could only be said that Yu Miaoqi's greed had reached a certain level. Even Yu Pinyin couldn't control him. Every time Yu Pinyin went to war, he would instruct the matriarch to seal his courtyard and study. He would also send people to check the seals every day. If there was even the slightest abnormality, they would immediately investigate thoroughly. In this way, the Marquis household was under his control like an iron chain. The Jingfu courtyard where Yu Xiang lived was only a wall away from his study. For convenience, there was a side door that was never locked. Yu Miaoqi told the matriarch about her grandson and granddaughter. He also told her to marry off her granddaughter as soon as possible. Then, Shen Yuanqi came to acknowledge his family. He also caused her and her granddaughter to make a big fuss in the Jingfu courtyard. Even the imperial bodyguards and servants were alarmed. When everyone was trying to persuade her and her granddaughter, where was Yu Miaoqi? Did he open the side door and sneak into her grandson's study? The more the matriarch thought about it, the more frightened she became. She used her cane to get out of bed. However, she woke up too late. Before she could leave the room, she heard a loud noise outside. Someone shouted, "Not good, the dragon scale guards are here to arrest people. Quickly go find the old lady." The matriarch hurriedly ran to the door of her grandson's study. She saw Ao Ping, surrounded by a group of dragon scale guards, coming out of the door. He held a small box full of letters in his hands and shouted, "The guilty official Yu Pinyin colluded with the people of Western Yi to usurp the throne. Now there is conclusive evidence. Men, arrest all of them." The dragon scale guards responded in unison. They tied the hands of all the servants behind their backs and took them away one by one. The matriarch was a first-rank noble lady, so she was given some face. 2 imperial bodyguards pressed a knife against her back and escorted her to the ox cart. Yu Siyu and Yu Miaoqi were also brought over. One was anxious and at a loss. The other was expressionless, but her eyes flashed with joy. This Marquis Yonla was finally destroyed by her. She was really happy. Even if fate had changed, some things were still surprisingly similar. In her previous life, Yu Miaoqi was already the 4th prince's wife, but she still used the same method to destroy Marquis Yonla. It was only because after Yu Pinyin gained power, Emperor Qing Kong wanted to take the crown prince, who was guarding the imperial mausoleum, back to the capital. Emperor Qing Kong had always doted on the crown prince. If not for the mandate of heaven, he would never send the crown prince out of the capital. As soon as Yu Pinyin handed over the memorial, Emperor Qing Kong readily agreed. The crown prince had Yu Pinyin's support behind him, and Emperor Qing Kang's favor. It was only a matter of time before he ascended the throne. Thus, for the sake of the 4th prince's great cause, and for her own bright future, Yu Miaoqi finally made a move against Marquis Yonla. Chapter 121. Those letters were quickly sent to Emperor Qing Kang's desk. The letter recorded that Yu Pinyin and Western Yi's 2nd prince had conspired to exchange 2 cities for high-quality warhorses and elite weapons. These warhorses and weapons were to be used to force the crown prince to abdicate. Yu Pinyin's defeat meant that he lost 2 cities, and they were Ulan Chabu and Fengxing cities that were agreed upon in the letter. Even if Yu Pinyin was being hunted down by Western Yi's 2nd prince, it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. If the letter was leaked, people could still say that he had tried to scheme against a tiger but failed. In short, he was no longer here. Dead men tell no tales, and they could splash any dirty water on his head. The real traitor was manipulating everything behind the scenes. Not only did he infiltrate the Dragon Scale Guard, the Imperial Academy of Medicine, the Imperial Palace, and Marquis Yonla, he even had connections in the army. Otherwise, with Yu Pinyin's bravery, he would not have been so easily defeated by the 2nd prince. After Emperor Qing Kong finished reading the secret letter, his face was unusually ugly, and the murderous aura around him seemed to be substantial. Ao Ping thought that he had succeeded, so he buried his head and waited for the next order. After a long silence, Emperor Qing Kong waved his hand and said, "Take people to search the Crown Prince mansion. Except for the Crown Prince and the young imperial grandson, if anyone else resists, kill them." Ao Ping bowed and accepted the order. Emperor Qing Kong had to admit that the ability of the person behind the scenes was not below that of the Crown Prince, and possibly even above him. But so what? This person could betray the interests of the country for his own selfish desires. The more outstanding he was, the more Emperor Qing Kong wanted to kill him. Not to mention the changes in the capital, far away in Shijiang, Yu Pinyin was experiencing the biggest disaster in his life. He was shot in the back, but because the arrowhead was stuck in his bones, it fortunately did not hurt his heart. However, he had been soaked in the cold river for a long time. After coming ashore, he had to run for his life for 5 days. If he did not pull out the arrowhead, he was afraid that the rust poison would enter his body and he would die from a high fever. However, the arrowhead was too close to the heart. If it was pierced too easily, it would injure the heart meridian and cause him to die from excessive blood loss. Unless he could escape as soon as possible and find a skilled doctor. Right now, Yu Pinyin and his 2 deputies were hiding in a cave to take a short rest. The lower reaches of the Wu River are the territory of the Western barbarians. If they go ashore, they will undoubtedly die. Therefore, Yu Pinyin desperately swam to the shore with the help of his 2 deputies and swam upstream. Along the way, it was not that they did not encounter any of the great Han Dynasty's soldiers, but they all avoided them. This battle should not have been a big defeat, but Yu Pinyin's central army did not receive support from the right wing. The left wing arrived in time and joined forces with the Western barbarians to encircle and annihilate the central army. The central army was completely annihilated and suffered countless casualties. At this juncture, how could Yu Pinyin not guess that someone in the army had defected to the enemy? Therefore, he didn't trust anyone and only brought the 2 surviving subordinates into the dense forest to avoid the search and rescue team. "General, you still have a fever," Left General Zhang Meng said worriedly. "I will boil some water for you to drink. Here is the leftover roast rabbit from yesterday, wait for me to heat it up." Right General Lin Jie was drilling wood to make a fire. The fire extinguishers in their clothes were wet with water, so they could only use this ancient method. "Treat the wound on your leg, it is bleeding again." Yu Pinyin's face was flushed and his voice was hoarse. Lin Jie agreed, but he was still making a fire and did not move. Zhang Meng tore the hem of his battle robe and wrapped the wound on his leg. The 3 of them were silent for a while. They had been trekking in the open water forest for 5 days and 5 nights. The deeper they went, the more they lost their way. Now they could only resign themselves to fate. As a soldier, they did not die in the hands of the enemy, but were plotted against by their comrades. The pain and hatred of being betrayed was something that ordinary people could not understand. The arrow on Yu Pinyin's back had been cut off, leaving only a small part stuck in his shoulder blade. He couldn't lie down or sit down. Right now, he was leaning against a rock. He took out a copper coin from his bosom and stared at it intently. If he died here, Shen Yuanqi would definitely take Xiang'er away and find a husband for her in a few years. His little sweetheart would be kissed, hugged, and even taken by another man. As long as he thought of the foreseeable future, his eyes were red and his mind was in a frenzy. He could not wait to raise his sword and destroy everything in sight. He deeply realized that he could not die here. "Don't make a fire, let's go immediately." He carefully put away the copper coin and said resolutely. "General, you have had a high fever for 3 consecutive days. Lie down and rest for a while." Lin Jie threw away the wood and went forward to stop him. "What we lack most now is time. Only by walking out of the forest as soon as possible can we have a chance of survival. Let's go, there is no time to waste." He pushed Lin Jie away, picked up the bow and arrow on the ground and strode out. The 2 of them had no choice but to guard him as he walked into the endless forest. About an hour later, the birds in the forest suddenly scattered in all directions. Soon after, there was the crisp sound of branches being chopped off and the faint sound of people talking. Yu Pinyin quickly climbed up the treetops. Lin Jie and Zhang Meng also lurked in the dark. The 3 of them pulled the bowstrings in their hands, and their eyes were full of killing intent. "I can feel that my brother is here, and he is getting closer and closer to me. He has a fever and his back is injured. We have to find him as soon as possible." Yu Xiang covered her burning forehead and said. Kohai and Ku Hui comforted her in a low voice. Tao Hong, Lu Lu, was almost paralyzed with fatigue. Seeing his master rushing forward, he could only bite the bullet and follow. Yu Xiang pushed aside a cluster of bushes, and the feeling of good luck made her suddenly raise her head. Yu Pinyin aimed at a group of people under the cover of the leaves. The person in the lead was wearing a dirty monk's robe. His hair was tied up in a bun and firmly tied behind his head with a rope. There were many muddy spots on his face, covering his facial features. Only a pair of big and round almond-shaped eyes were shining with a determined light. Even though the person was unrecognizable, Yu Pinyin still recognized the pair of eyes that had appeared countless times in his dreams. He shouted in disbelief, "Xiang brother." Yu Xiang also raised her head, and her expression was ecstatic. Zhang Meng and Lin Jie, who were hibernating, released their bowstrings and walked out hesitantly. They knew that the general's most precious sister was called Yu Xiang. But they had never thought that the legendary arrogant and domineering daughter of a rich family would appear in such a sorry state in the dangerous forest. "Brother, come down quickly." Yu Xiang waved her hands, shouted and jumped with a bright smile on her face, but tears kept flowing, washing the mud on her face into 2 grooves. She looked very funny. Yu Pinyin jumped down from the branch and strode over. He was very upset and scolded coldly, "How can you come to Shijiang alone? Do you want to die?" "I didn't come alone. The eminent monks of Zhenghua Temple escorted me here. Look." Yu Xiang pointed behind her. Kohai and the others put their palms together and saluted. Zhang Meng and Lin Jie were overjoyed. The monks of Zhenghua Temple were famous for being good at trekking. They traveled by foot. Although the forest was vast and steep, it was not enough to stop them. This was really a blessing from heaven. The 2 hurried forward and saluted. Yu Pinyin, however, had no time to care about the masters. He grabbed the little girl who was about to jump into his arms and asked, "Are you hurt? Why didn't you stay at home?" "I'm not hurt. I dreamed that you were hit by a stray arrow and fell into the water. That's why I went out to look for you. I don't have any other thoughts. I just want to die with you." Yu Xiang wiped her tears and added, "But I know you must be fine. Can't we stop talking nonsense? You have a fever and you're injured. We need to find a place to treat your injuries quickly. Let's go." She carefully held her brother's arm, afraid of touching his wound. She wanted to pull him forward, but she had to control her strength. Yu Pinyin stared at her anxious face and finally smiled for the first time in days. Although Zhang Meng and Lin Jie were chatting with the masters, they were listening to the brother and sister's conversation. They came all the way to Shijiang to look for him just because of a dream, regardless of life and death. Their intentions were really too great. They finally understood why their commander doted on his arrogant sister so much. If their relatives were willing to sacrifice their lives for them, they would feel that no amount of love was enough. Kohai led them to a cave. The cave was spacious and dry. Yu Xiang untied her brother's battle robe and saw the wounds on his body and the arrowheads on his back. Her big eyes were suddenly filled with tears. Tao Hong and Lu Lu took out a fire and made a fire. They boiled water in the alms bowls brought by the monks. "Don't cry. Seeing you cry makes me feel worse than being shot by an arrow." Yu Pinyin wiped the tears and mud on her face with his fingertips. If Ku Hui wasn't checking the wounds, he would have held his sister in his arms and kissed her. "I won't cry." Yu Xiang immediately wiped her tears with her sleeves, but because her clothes were too dirty, her white face became darker and darker. She looked like a lynx. Yu Pinyin couldn't help laughing. Zhang Meng and Lin Jie were helping Tao Hong and Lu Lu boil water. They were surprised to hear their commander laughing. Their commander had always been cold and emotionless. It was the first time they had seen such a tender and affectionate side of him. It was said that their commander loved his sister more than his life. It seemed that the rumors were true. However, Miss Three wasn't arrogant and domineering. She could step into danger for her brother without hesitation and risk her life twice for him. She had a lot of feelings for her brother. This pair of brother and sister had such deep feelings for each other, and their hearts were as close as could be. It was truly enviable. Yu Xiang glared at her brother and asked for some hot water from Tao Hong to wipe her face. Ku Hui examined the remaining half of the arrow and said slowly, "Almsgiver you are indeed very lucky to have almost injured your heart meridian. I'll pull the arrow out for you. It might be very painful, so please be prepared." "Wait, don't pull it out yet." Yu Xiang quickly stopped him. She took out a handkerchief from her bag, folded it into a strip, and stuffed it into her brother's mouth. Then she said, "Pull it out." Ku Hui nodded and was about to pull out the arrow when she stopped him. "Wait. Benefactor Yu Xiang, if you have something to say, please say it all at once. I don't want my hand to slip." Ku Hui was helpless. "I'm sorry." Yu Xiang apologized sincerely and suggested, "You can count to 3 before pulling it out. It's so scary." Yu Pinyin couldn't help laughing. He spat out the handkerchief and said with a smile, "As long as my little sapling is by my side, I have nothing to fear. Master Ku Hui, you can pull it out however you want. I can take it." Chapter 122. Ku Hui began to count as instructed. Yu Xiang tightly held her brother's large hand. Every time she counted a number, she would gasp and tremble. Her eyes were wide open and her nose wrinkled. She looked like she was in 100 times more pain than an injured person. Not only did Yu Pinyin find it funny, but even Master Ku Hui couldn't help but laugh. He secretly sighed at the two's sincere feelings. "Wait, stop counting." This time, it was Yu Pinyin himself who called for them to stop. He pulled his trembling sister into his arms and hugged her tightly. Then, he covered her bright eyes with his large hand and ordered in a deep voice, "Pull it out." As soon as his voice fell, Ku Hui decisively pulled out the arrowhead and used a silver needle to stop the bleeding. There were signs of ulceration around the wound. He had no choice but to burn the dagger red to remove the rotten flesh bit by bit. However, Yu Pinyin didn't make a sound. Even his muscles were completely relaxed. Hugging his beloved baby that he thought about day and night, he didn't feel anything other than sweetness and joy. Yu Xiang pulled his hand away and looked up to observe his expression. She happened to meet his affectionate gaze and was momentarily stunned. The two looked at each other for a long time. Then, naturally, they hugged each other tightly. Ku Hui treated Yu Pinyin's wound as quickly as possible. Then, he turned to treat the 2 deputy generals. Tao Hong and Lu Lu came over with 2 alms bowls filled with hot water. They planned to wipe Master Ho's body. "Let me do it." Yu Xiang snatched the handkerchief. "Miss, you should rest. You have to apply bone ointment every day. Don't forget." Lu Lu said as she placed a long branch on the rock wall. Then, she opened her bag and took out several monks' robes. She hung them on the branch as a curtain. After making sure that Ku Hui and the others couldn't see this scene from 5 meters away, she squatted down and took off her master's cloth shoes. Then, she rolled up her master's trousers. Because of the long journey, Yu Xiang's knee bone hurt badly. If she didn't apply bone ointment every day, she definitely wouldn't have made it to Shijiang. In order not to burden her brother, she could only return the wet handkerchief to Tao Hong and ordered, "Be careful when you wipe it. Don't touch my brother's wound." Yu Pinyin moved over and stared at the medicine bottle in Lulu's hand. He asked, "What happened to Xianger?" But his leg injury acted up again. "Can you still walk?" "Young Mrs. Legs have just recovered, and she's already walking so much. It's inevitable that it'll be a burden on the newly grown bones. But don't worry, Master Ho. Master Ku Hui said that as long as you apply the bone-replenishing ointment for an hour every day, you'll be fine." Yu Pinyin was relieved. He took the medicine bottle from her hand and carefully applied the black medicine to his sister's slightly red and swollen kneecaps. His handsome face tightened because of the pain in his heart. After he finished applying the ointment, he saw Lulu wipe his sister's feet with a handkerchief. Then, he pushed her to the side and picked up his sister's small and delicate jade feet to examine them. His face became gloomier and gloomier. He still remembered how smooth and soft his sister's feet were before he left for war. Because she had never walked before, they were as delicate as a newborn baby's. But now, her feet were blistered one after another. Her heels even had calluses from walking for a long time. They looked very rough. Wuxia was stared at by his deep gaze for a long time. She felt a little uncomfortable. She shrunk her feet and asked in a small voice, "Are they ugly?" "No, they're not ugly at all." Pinyin lowered his head and kissed her snow-white feet. He said firmly, "In the future, Big Brother will definitely not let you suffer the slightest bit." "Why would they suffer?" Wuxia was tickled by his hard beard stubble. She giggled and said, "As long as I can find you, I'm willing to climb a mountain of swords or dive into a sea of fire. You're still alive, and I'm still alive. The two of us are safe and sound together. All the suffering isn't suffering." She leaned over and whispered in her brother's ear, "It's sweetness, it's happiness. Big Brother, I miss you so much." She hugged her brother's neck and pressed her lips against his dry and chapped lips. She licked them inch by inch with the tip of her tongue. Then, she sighed with satisfaction. Her eyes slowly turned red. Pinyin also stuck out the tip of his tongue and slowly hooked it with hers. His endless gentle movements told her his deep and heavy longing. Tao Hong and Lulu were used to this. One helped Master Ho wipe the bloodstains on his back, while the other helped Miss dry her feet. Zhang Meng and the others couldn't see the scene on the other side of the monk's robe. They could only hear the brother and sister whispering to each other. They sighed in their hearts, "With such a loving sister, if I were Master Ho, I'm afraid I would even give her my heart." No wonder Master Ho only doted on Miss Three despite having three sisters. On the other side, Pinyin really wanted to dig out his fiery heart for his sister to keep. After a tender kiss, he hugged his sister tightly in his arms. His arms tightened until he saw Lulu take out a silver needle. He reluctantly let go. "Let me do it." He took the silver needle and held up his sister's small and delicate feet. "This is an ointment. Apply it after you break the blisters. Put it on the fire and it'll be fine tomorrow morning." Lulu took out a medicine bottle from his bag. After Tao Hong finished wiping Master Ho's back, he took off his robe and put it on Master Ho's shoulders. He went outside and picked up a few sparks to start a fire. If the blisters on her feet weren't broken and dried in time, they would rot after a long time. She might not even be able to walk. Pinyin carefully broke the blisters and asked if it hurt from time to time. Wuxia kept shaking her head. She held her cheeks and looked greedily at her brother. It was so good to finally find her brother. Even if Shijiang was full of danger and war, as long as she could be with her brother, her life was like heaven. Pinyin looked up and saw his sister's charming and cute smile. Her eyes even showed a bit of infatuation, so he also smiled. After dealing with the blisters, he also took off his boots and put them by the fire to dry. Wuxia moved to his side and held his big hand with her small hand. Their fingers intertwined, and her small feet rubbed against his big feet. She sighed contentedly. Pinyin directly put her on his lap and pressed her little head into his arms. He wrapped his arms tightly around her slender waist and whispered, "You've lost weight." Returning to the familiar and warm embrace, Wuxia didn't even want to say anything. She just hummed in a low voice. Outside, Tao Hong and Lulu took out dry food, broke it up, and threw it into the boiling water to cook a pot of porridge for everyone. Zhang Meng and Lin Jie hadn't eaten a full meal for a long time. They drank a lot and were very satisfied. "Master Ho, miss, eat something to warm yourself up." Tao Hong and Lulu each carried a bowl of porridge in. Yu Xiang touched her brother's forehead and found that his fever had subsided. She immediately smiled and got down from his lap. She took the porridge and slowly blew it to cool it down. Yu Pinyin was not afraid of the heat. He finished the porridge in 2 or 3 mouthfuls. Then he smiled and looked at his sister who was licking the porridge like a cat. The dry rations were made from buckwheat that had been fried until it was golden yellow. After it was boiled, the porridge carried a charred fragrance, and the texture was extremely thick and soft. It was simply even more delicious than the jade stem porridge that was meticulously cooked by the Marquis' estate's chef. Of course, Yu Xiang knew that this was just an illusion, so she whispered with a smile, "People say that love fills one's stomach. Now I finally understand the meaning of this sentence. After my brother left, I felt that the dragon liver and phoenix marrow were tasteless. Now that I'm with my brother, I feel that eating grains is also a kind of enjoyment." Yu Pinyin smiled and lowered his head to peck the tip of her nose. He felt that it was not enough, so he pinched her chin and sucked her lips. He shared the last mouthful of porridge inside. "It's really delicious." Yu Xiang proudly threw a charming look at him and returned the bowl of porridge to Lulu. She plunged into her brother's arms and rubbed her head against him. Yu Pinyin ran his fingers through her hair and gently combed through it. His deep eyes were filled with love that was about to burst out of his heart. She relied on him, and he also relied on her. They were each other's spiritual support. Yu Pinyin noticed that his sister had stopped moving and her breathing had become shallow and long. He looked down and found that she had fallen asleep. Her eyebrows were relaxed and the corners of her mouth were slightly curved. Her dream must be very sweet, and he must be there. Yu Pinyin narrowed his eyes and carefully wrapped his sister in his robe and held her in his arms. Lulu washed the porridge bowl and saw that Zhang Meng and Lin Jia were taking a nap. Kohai, Ku Hui, and other masters were meditating with their eyes closed. Lulu lifted his monk robe and knelt at Master Ho's feet. He whispered, "Master Ho, when Miss came here, she had 2 dreams." Marquis Yongle and the Crown Prince Mansion were raided. After describing the dream in detail, she anxiously asked, "Master Ho, when we came here, the Han army had retreated to Chabu City and was surrounded by the Westerny people. I'm afraid we can't enter. Where should we go now? What should we do about the old lady in the capital?" Yu Pinyin was silent. Even if Lulu did not say it, he knew that Marquis Yongle would definitely be implicated by him. Since that person dared to betray his country, his goal must be not small. Getting rid of him was just a prelude. The real target was the Crown Prince. Who would benefit the most if the Crown Prince fell? The remaining princes were all suspects. He was now a general of a defeated army, and there was a stigma on his head. He could not easily return to the capital. The army he led was now retreating to Chabu City. The city was surrounded by the Western army, and there were spies hidden inside. He could not return. Therefore, he could only mobilize the troops stationed near Chabu City to launch a surprise attack on the Western army. Not only did he have to take back the 2 lost cities, but he also had to completely drive the Western people out of the Wu River. He wanted to fight, and he wanted to fight to the end. As for the besieged Chabu City, he was not worried at all. If this defeat was really the work of a prince, he must have reached a consensus with the second prince of the Western E. The Western E imperial court was currently in internal strife, and several princes were fighting for the throne. Killing him and taking away 2 cities was a strong political capital for the second prince. In order to rush back to fight for the throne, he would not stay at the border for too long. Besieging Chabu City was just an act. In a few months, the 2 sides would negotiate for peace. Therefore, he had to rush to the nearest station as soon as possible to mobilize the army to fight back. Moreover, the commander of the station must be someone he trusted. Chapter 123. After his sister fell asleep, Yu Pinyin gently placed her on the thick hay. Then, he tightened his robe to make sure that she would not catch a cold. Then, he lifted his monk robe and sat beside Zhang Meng and Lin Jie. Kuhai and the others were still meditating, motionless like statues. You should know that someone in the army has defected to the enemy. Now that our army has retreated to Chabu city and is surrounded by the Westerny people, we are trapped both internally and externally. Moreover, I'm afraid that the blame for this defeat will be pushed to us, and we might even have to take the blame for those who really defected to the enemy, he whispered. Su Mao, the vanguard general leading the left wing, must have defected to the enemy. As for whether there are others, it is uncertain now. Since someone has defected to the enemy, I'm afraid that the internal and external difficulties are also an act. The second prince of Western Yi is anxious to go back to fight for the throne and will soon withdraw his troops to negotiate for peace. General, if we want to clear the injustice, we must destroy the Western Yi army and take back the 2 lost cities. Lin Jie analyzed seriously. But there are only 3 of us left in the army, how can we fight against the Western Yi army? Zhang Meng was dejected. Go to the Star Luo path and dispatch Fang Da's 50,000 troops. We will launch a surprise attack on the Western Yi people and directly kill Shiganbala. Yu Pinyan's eyes flashed with a strong killing intent. Fang Da was his former subordinate and was saved by him several times. He could be considered loyal. 50,000 men and horses against 200,000 troops was indeed a little small, but if it was a surprise attack, as long as they fiercely attacked the middle army led by the second Prince Shiganbala and directly took his head, the Western Yi army would certainly be in chaos. Although there were traitors hiding in the Han army, most of the generals were still loyal to him and would definitely open the city gates to help. With cooperation from the inside and outside, they would definitely win this battle. Zhang Meng and Lin Jie looked at each other with joy on their faces. However, they soon became depressed and advised in unison, General, dispatching the border garrison without permission is a capital offense. Even if you win, you will be impeached by the imperial censor when you return to the court. Yu Pinyan took out a token made of dark iron from his inner pocket and flashed it in front of them. The World Army Marshal's Tiger Token. Zhang Meng and Lin Jie were shocked. The so-called Grand Marshal of the world's armed forces was the marshal who could lead the entire Great Han Dynasty's armed forces. There was no doubt that only the previous emperors would be able to take on this role. This tiger tally should have been in the hands of Emperor Qingkong, but now it was split into 2 and given to Yu Pinyan. With this half-tiger tally, he could dispatch all the troops stationed in Xizang at will. Commander-in-Chief, His Majesty really trusts you. Lin Jie let out a long sigh, and his heart was finally at ease. Therefore, we cannot fail the Emperor's trust. Not only must we drive the Western Yi army out of the Wu River, we must also flatten the Western Yi imperial court. Yu Pinyan said resolutely. The 2 of them nodded vigorously. They drew a simple map on the ground and began to discuss the battle plan. This discussion lasted until the moon was high in the sky. Master Kuhai and the others were still meditating. Yu Xiang, Tao Hong, and Lu Lu were huddled together and sleeping very soundly. They didn't even get up for dinner. It was obvious that they were very tired. Okay, it's settled. Early tomorrow morning, let Master Kuhai take us directly from Kueshui Forest to Xing Luo Road. We can also avoid the pursuers sent by Su Mao to assassinate us. Yu Pinyan used a branch to mess up the map. Zhang Meng and Lin Jie nodded in agreement. Only then did the 3 of them rest. It was a dreamless night. The next day, Yu Pinyan was awakened by a series of coughs. He looked down and found that the delicate little thing in his arms was missing. Xianger. He suddenly got up and shouted anxiously. What? Yu Xiang lifted his monk robe, revealing a small face covered with black ash. Yu Pinyan's manic mood immediately turned into joy. He scratched the tip of her nose and asked, "Why are you so dirty?" "I'm making a fire to boil medicine for you. Sometimes I have to boil it with a big fire, and sometimes I have to simmer it with a small fire. Sometimes I have to add firewood, and sometimes I have to remove the sparks. I can't control it well. Yu Xiang looked depressed. Yu Pinyin led her to the fire. Sure enough, there was an alms bowl engraved with scriptures on the stone stove. The herbs in the bowl had been boiled, and the thick smell of herbs wafted in the cave. Very good, he praised with a smile. He looked around and asked, where are the others? Brother Zhang and Brother Lin said that they were going to Xing Luo Road, so Master Kuhai took them to explore the road first. Tao Hong and Lu Lu went out to pick wild fruits. When they come back, we'll eat some wild fruits and chew some dry food before we set off. Yu Xiang used a handkerchief as a cushion and carefully picked up the alms bowl. He said softly, come, drink the medicine first. Yu Pinyin was afraid that she would be scalded, so he quickly took the alms bowl. He blew on it and drank a mouthful. Seeing his sister staring at him, he asked, what's wrong? Are you hungry? If you're hungry, Big Brother will cook some buckwheat porridge for you. You don't have to wait for them. I'm not hungry. Yu Xiang waved her hand. She blinked and asked, Big Brother, is the medicine bitter? Yu Pinyin drank another mouthful and smiled. It's not bitter. How can it not be bitter? You're lying. Yu Xiang glared at her brother accusingly. Yu Pinyin had no choice but to compromise. Yeah, it's a little bitter. That's more like it. After getting the answer she wanted, Yu Xiang leaned over and said eagerly, then should I add some sugar for you? You even brought white sugar when you went out. Yu Pinyin was surprised. He knew that the little girl loved to eat sweets, but he didn't expect her to bring sugar when she went out. She was indeed a child. I didn't bring white sugar. This is pure natural honey that I produced myself. Yu Xiang gave him a smug look. Then, she took the bowl and drank a mouthful of medicine. She leaned over and poured the medicine into her brother's mouth. At the end, she didn't forget to lick away the bitterness in his mouth with her little tongue. Yu Pinyin was only stunned for a moment before he immediately wrapped his lips around her smooth and fragrant tongue and exchanged a deep kiss. The two of them reluctantly separated and pulled out a long silver thread from their mouths. After licking the silver thread, Yu Xiang raised her eyebrows and asked, is it sweet? It was so sweet that it reached the bottom of her heart. Yu Pinyin smiled but didn't answer. He pulled his sister into his arms and kissed her again. The two of them intertwined and drank the medicine one mouthful at a time. They only separated when they heard footsteps. When we return to Beijing, we'll get married immediately. Yu Pinyin recognized Tao Hong and Lu Lu's footsteps. He pulled his sister back into his arms and whispered into her ear. Lu Lu told you, right? Ancestor doesn't agree to us being together. The smile on Yu Xiang's face collapsed. It's fine. I'll marry you even if she doesn't agree. She'll come around after some time. Yu Pinyin lowered his head and pecked the corner of her lips. Yu Xiang became happy again. She played with her brother's slender fingers and said, Brother, you don't know how much I miss you. I dream of you every night. What do you dream of me for? Yu Pinyin's voice was hoarse. His large palm slowly moved down her back to her waist. His fingertips fiddled with her belt. I dreamed that you were kissing me. Then, I woke up and found that my mouth was still sucking air. Yu Xiang raised her red lips and made a pecking motion, causing Yu Pinyin to chuckle and bite her lips. With Xiang by his side, no matter how dangerous the situation was, he would feel like he was in heaven. Therefore, he couldn't die, he couldn't lose, and he couldn't lose his power. He wanted to give her the best things in the world. Yu Xiang was scalded by his affectionate and passionate gaze. Her ears turned red and she continued, I realized that I don't like walking at all. After a long time, my kneecaps hurt. I like it when you hug me. You hug me wherever you go. Unfortunately, Everyone knows that I can walk now. When we go back, you won't be able to hug me openly anymore. Yu Pinyin couldn't help but suggest, then I'll help you build a wheelchair. When we go back, you can sit in the wheelchair. Say that your leg is injured again and you can't move. That's a good idea. I'll walk when I want to. If I don't want to, I'll let you hug me. It's so comfortable. Yu Xian hung onto her brother's neck and acted spoiled. When Tao Hong and Lu Lu returned, they heard the siblings' nonsensical conversation. Their foreheads twitched. Master Ho, miss, have some wild fruits. They opened their bags and took out a few bright red fruits. Kohai and the others returned not long after. After breakfast, they hurriedly set off in the direction of Xing Luo Road. The news that Yu Pinyin was a spy for Shiyi broke out in the capital. It would take a month for it to spread back to Shijiang. This month was enough for him to contact Fangde to launch a surprise attack on Shiyi's army. When he turned defeat into victory, even if the accusation of colluding with foreign enemies was spread to Shijiang, no one would believe it. When Yu Pinyin and the others successfully arrived at Xing Luo Road, Old Madam and the others were locked up in the prison. The servants and masters were locked up separately. Therefore, Old Madam, Yu Siyu, and Yu Miaoqi lived in the same cell. Mama Ma and dozens of other people were squeezed on the opposite side. Yu Siyu's marriage was disrupted again. However, her husband didn't break off the engagement. Instead, he came to visit her every day and said some encouraging words. On this day, Old Madam sent off her grandson-in-law. She clung to the door of the prison and anxiously waited. Yu Miaoqi sarcastically said, "Don't look. She is now the Lord Shen's younger sister. She is also the Minister of Agriculture personally conferred by His Majesty. You don't know how comfortable her life is. How could she come to the side of a prisoner like you? Younger sister Xianger isn't an ungrateful wretch like you. If she knew that something happened to the Marquis household, she would definitely come." Yu Siyu retorted. "She won't come. The Lord Shen won't let her wade into our muddy waters. Moreover, I was the one who personally drove her out. She must still blame me." Old Madam slumped to the ground. Yu Siyu hurriedly hugged her and patted her to comfort her. Seeing that Yu Miaoqi was still sneering, she couldn't help but become angry. She untied her belt and quickly walked over. In the blink of an eye, she strangled her neck and sternly questioned, "Speak, were you the one who put the evidence in Big Brother's study?" The Marquis household was heavily guarded, especially around the study. The patrolling imperial bodyguards came and went without stopping. Unless something happened to Jingfu Courtyard, they wouldn't leave their posts without permission. It just so happened that Shen Yuanqi came to acknowledge his family. Yu Xiang and Old Madam pulled in the courtyard and made a big fuss. It attracted many imperial bodyguards to mediate. Yu Miaoqi's figure could be seen everywhere in these accidents. Ordinary people wouldn't destroy their own family for selfish desires. However, if it was Yu Miaoqi, it was simply a certainty. She had never seen herself as a member of the family Yu for a moment. She could abandon anyone for her own future. Chapter 124. Yu Siyu had trained in the countryside for more than half a year, so the strength of her hands was incomparable to that of an ordinary maiden. She squeezed Yu Miaoqi's neck until it cracked. If this continued for a few more breaths, Yu Miaoqi's life would have been taken away. Yu Miaoqi's face turned purple. Because she was desperately trying to breathe, blue veins popped out on her forehead. She looked both ferocious and battered. She felt like her head was slowly emptying, and her chest was rapidly expanding. It was as if her ribs would burst open in the next second. She was about to die. She could only helplessly scratch the ground. Her broken fingernails mixed with blood fell into the straw pile. "What are you doing?" "Murder. There's murder here." A cry of alarm caused Yusiyu to loosen her grip. Yumiauchi's throat was strained as she hurriedly pulled on her belt to breathe. Mother, save me. They want to kill me. She turned her head to look at the terrified Lin clan outside the prison. Lin clan rushed over and loudly berated Yusiyu, then immediately begged her to be merciful. The matriarch closed her eyes and remained unmoved. When she heard the footsteps of the officials running over, she slowly opened her mouth. Let her go. No matter who ordered her, without Marquis Yongle, she has no value. Sooner or later, she will be abandoned like a pair of worn-out shoes and die a horrible death. I'll wait and see what happens to her. Yusiyu finally gave up and quickly fastened her belt. Yumiauchi hurriedly covered her neck and crawled to Lin clan's side. She tightly hugged her thin arms. Marquis Yongle's women were all like wolves and tigers. If they were angered, they would even dare to kill people. No wonder they could raise a living king of hell like Yupinian. Shen Yuanqi also arrived with the officials. He was wearing an official's robe, but he had already taken off his official's hat and held it in his hands. He looked very tired. In the imperial court, the official's hat must not be taken off at will. Shen Yuanqi's action could only mean two things. First, he had been demoted. Second, he intended to retire and return to his hometown. Shen Yuanqi was only in his early 20s. In any case, it was impossible for him to retire and return to his hometown. Then, there was only one possibility. He had been implicated by Marquis Yongle. The old lady was overcome with grief. She walked quickly to the cell door and asked anxiously, Lord Shen, what are you doing? Old madam, you don't have to blame yourself. Shen is only temporarily suspended from his post and has not been stripped of his scholarly titles. Shen has already asked His Majesty for an imperial decree. I will let you out now, please. Shen Yuanqi waved his hand at the yamen runner. The yamen runner immediately opened the prison door and respectfully invited old madam out. As the saying goes, a centipede dies but never falls down. Although the Marquis household was in a precarious situation, the emperor still remembered their old friendship. Because of this, no one dared to rashly touch the matriarch and the others. Now that the crown prince had been imprisoned, it caused a huge commotion inside and outside the court. In this morning's court meeting, many officials came out to plead for leniency on behalf of the crown prince. The generals also expressed Commandant Yu's loyalty one after another. However, with irrefutable evidence, Emperor Qing Kong did not listen to them at all. Everyone who pleaded for leniency was fiercely reprimanded by him. Several officials who were on good terms with the crown prince and Yupinian were suspended from their posts and investigated. Shen Yuanqi was one of them. The old lady felt ashamed and looked hopefully behind him. Shen Yuanqi faintly glanced at Yumiauchi, who was huddling together with the Lin clan. In a warm voice, he said, Old madam, leave with Shen first. Other matters can be discussed after you have settled down. This place is unlucky. It's not advisable to stay here for long. The old lady nodded and slowly walked out with Yusiyu's support. She did not expect that in such a time of crisis, Shen Yuanqi would come to help. It could be seen that the family Shen was a righteous and affectionate person. She really made a big mistake. She should not have obstructed Xiong'er for the sake of so-called morality and honor. As long as everyone was well, safe and happy together, it was more important than anything else. Thinking of her granddaughter who had already separated from her, and thinking of her grandson whose life was unknown, the old lady cried bitterly after boarding the carriage. Yumiauchi naturally did not dare to touch the old lady's side. She followed the Lin clan and boarded another carriage. Shen Yuanqi was suspended from his post and investigated. Good, it was killing two birds with one stone. She lowered her eyes and secretly smiled. When she passed by the sealed Marquis Yongle, she lifted the curtain and looked for a long time. The two returned to the Lin residence. They broke the brazier and swept it with grapefruit leaves before sitting down to talk. Tell me honestly, did that person ask you to put the evidence of your crimes? Do you know what you are doing? Your surname is Yu. If Prefecture Yu falls, you will be the descendant of a criminal official. Not to mention the princes and descendants, even ordinary people will not marry you. How can you frame your brother? No matter what, he is still your brother. This was the first time the Lin clan had spoken so harshly to their daughter. Yu Miaoqi refused to admit it. She only said that she asked that person to find Sun Mingjie to marry Yu Xiang. She did not know anything else. The Lin clan repeatedly questioned her several times. Seeing her firm expression and full of grievance, they believed her. Only then did they restore their gentle appearance and let her go back to her room to sleep. As a mother, who would be willing to think the worst of their children? Yu Miaoqi bowed and left. After returning to her room, she lay on the bed and smiled coldly. So what if she was the descendant of a criminal official? She did not tell the Lin clan that when Yu Xiu pushed her into the water and tried to drown her, she saw many wonderful scenes. She saw that she had become the wife of the fourth imperial prince. The fourth imperial prince was deeply in love with her and doted on her. She also saw that she had paid a spy to assassinate Yu Pinyin on the battlefield, and then put the crime of colluding with foreign enemies on him to bring down the crown prince. In the end, the fourth imperial prince ascended the throne, and she became the empress. Using the great power in her hands, she turned around and rehabilitated the prefecture Yu. She used the crime of framing to bring down the fifth imperial prince who had been Xian Qinhuang at that time. The fifth imperial prince was sentenced to be beheaded at the Meridian Gate. Marquis Yongla's injustice was cleared. The dead Yu Pinyin was posthumously given the title of Duke of Yu. Marquis Yongla went one step further. But because Yu Pinyin had not married and had no children, she chose a young child from the cadet branch to be raised by the old Tai Tai to inherit the title and continue the glory of the prefecture Yu. In those scenes, the enormous Marquis Yongla was played in the palm of her hand. She destroyed him when she said she would, and he would rise when she said she would. It was just a light touch of her lips. Everyone, including the old Tai Tai, worshipped her like a god and did not dare to be disrespectful. She could make clouds and rain with a flip of her hand. This was the taste of power. It was so real and so close. She almost instantly believed that this was her fate in the future. The gaze that the fourth imperial prince looked at her with was so warm and affectionate. It was the same gaze that Yu Pinyin had when he looked at Yu Xiang. So even though she was the daughter of a criminal official, she was not in a hurry. She believed that the fourth imperial prince would not abandon her. Just as her thoughts were running wild, the head of the Lin clan came in with a brocade box and said in a low voice, "That person just sent someone to deliver this. He also gave you a message for you to endure for now. He will think of a way to get you a new identity." The Lin clan had always thought that the other party became friends with their daughter because of the power in Yu Pinyin's hands. Now that he did not abandon her, she was completely relieved. Yu Miaoqi held the brocade box and smiled sweetly. Shen Yuanqi settled the old Tai Tai and the others in a village in the suburbs. Everything was arranged properly. Even the servants of the prefecture Yu were accommodated. The rest of the people stayed in the camp to drink wine and play with military prostitutes. Therefore, when Yu Pinyin attacked, he didn't even wear pants. He only wore a battle robe and his two hairy legs were bare as he hurriedly climbed onto the horse's back. Seeing the cloud of dust in the sky, he was scared. Then he saw the vast army quickly gathered together and rushed straight to the center of the army. He turned his horse around and wanted to escape. The commander was in chaos, and the soldiers were even more panicked. Without needing the Han army to make a move, they were trampled to death by their own people. When the generals in the city saw this, they quickly opened the city gate and rushed to help. With cooperation from the inside and outside, they killed the 200,000 soldiers. Then they continued to chase after the second prince to Ulan Chabu and Fengxing city. They actually wanted to take back the two cities in one go. Chapter 125. Yu Pinyin was already famous for his fighting prowess. His reputation as the living king of hell was equivalent to tens of thousands of troops. He came back from the dead, and no one knew where he got 50,000 troops from. In the eyes of the Westerny people, he was no less than a heavenly soldier. Psychologically, they were scared, and their legs went soft on the battlefield. In just one day and one night, the Westerny army was defeated again and again. Not only did they lose Ulan Chabu and Fengxing city, they were also driven to the shore of the Wu River by Yu Pinyin. With nowhere to go, they had no choice but to wade across the river. The Westerny second prince's legs were bare, and the target was too obvious. He was shot in the back by Yu Pinyin and fell from the horse. Several soldiers tied him up and dragged him back to the barracks. The situation of the war was completely reversed, but the Han army also suffered heavy losses. Fang Da's 50,000 troops did not have any casualties, but Yu Pinyin's own elite troops lost more than half. There were only 3 people left in the middle army, and the right wing was ambushed, leaving only tens of thousands of people. Only the left wing led by Su Mao only suffered a few hundred casualties, which was a miracle. Looking at the battle report in his hand, Yu Pinyin sneered, and then ordered people to bring his sister, Master Kuhai, and others to Ulan Chabu. At present, the Western imperial court was already in chaos, and several princes led their respective tribes to fight. He was waiting for the Western army to suffer heavy losses, and then he would give a fatal blow. But in order to numb the Western people, he sent a letter to the Western emperor, asking them to take land, cattle, horses, and gold to redeem the second prince, giving them the illusion that he wanted to seek peace. After taking care of everything, he walked to the dungeon, took a whip dipped in salt water from the soldier's hand, and ruthlessly whipped the second prince. Mournful screams echoed in the cramped space. The second prince was only 19 years old, and it was his first time on the battlefield. How could he withstand such torture? He betrayed Su Mao and the others in no time. However, he had no idea which prince was behind Su Mao. There were also several other generals in the interrogation. When they heard this, they turned to look at Su Mao and his trusted aides. Su Mao took the initiative and asked, regardless of whether this barbarian's words can be believed or not, there is no conclusive evidence. I want to ask the commander why he privately dispatched the border garrison. This is a crime punishable by death. Zhang Meng and Lin Jie did not care about his struggles and directly tied him to the torture rack. The red-hot soldering iron was pressed deeply into his chest, and then the word rebel was branded on his cheek. I refuse to accept this. You have no evidence and you are abusing the law. I don't accept this. He shouted at the top of his lungs. One after another, his trusted aides stood up and shouted that they were not convinced. They also said that if they were to be judged guilty, the commander-in-chief privately mobilizing the troops was a crime worthy of 10,000 deaths. As such, the left wing had become Su Mao's private army. Tie them all up. It's better to kill the wrong person than to let them go. Yu Pinyin waved his sleeves and the soldiers rushed forward to tie them up. As long as the left-wing general was eliminated, the soldiers under his command would still have to listen to the commander's orders. The dungeon was silent. The remaining generals wanted to say something but hesitated. They looked at Fang De frequently. Although the two of them had won the battle, they would still be sentenced to death when they returned to the capital for the crime of privately mobilizing troops. They were loyal to the commander, but even more loyal to Emperor Qing Kong. They were thinking about how to deal with this. Yu Pinyin looked at the crowd indifferently. Seeing that there were no sneaky people left, he took out the dark iron token from his inner pocket. Everyone was shocked. Even Su Mao stopped cursing and looked dazed. They never thought that the emperor would trust the commander to this extent. Use torture. We must find out the mastermind behind this. Yu Pinyin waved his hand and walked out of the dungeon slowly. In order to prevent spies from hiding in Ulan Chabu, Yu Xiang and his 2 servants still disguised themselves as secular disciples and mixed in with a group of monks. Ku Hui went to the barracks to treat the wounded as soon as he arrived. In order to reduce the pain caused by the friction of cloth, most of the wounded took off their battle robes and exposed their breasts. Some were injured on their legs and did not even wear pants. Therefore, when Yu Xiang proposed to take care of the wounded, he was glared at by Yu Pinyin. He had no choice but to go back to his room with Tao Hong and Lu Lu to rest. Although Yu Pinyin had special treatment as the commander, the courtyard he lived in was not big. There were a total of 5 rooms. 2 of them were filled with sundries. A soldier was in charge of washing clothes and cooking. You can go back. I'll take care of things here. Yu Xiang said to the soldier in a rough voice. Because the commander had ordered him to listen to this person's orders, the soldier obediently left. Yu Xiang immediately changed to a crisp voice. Quickly start the fire. I'll cook for Gij. Tao Hong squatted in front of the stove to start the fire. Lu Lu looked through the basket and asked worriedly, Miss, you've never cooked before. Can you do it? You'll know once you try. Yu Xiang picked up the kitchen knife and gestured at the pork on the chopping board. After a while, the pork was not cooked properly, the vegetables were burned, the eggs were smashed on the ground, and the rice was burnt. All the ingredients were completely ruined by her. Forget it. Miss, you can make the pancakes. This is the easiest. Look, I'll knead the dough and spread it out into a pancake. You just need to wipe the inside of the pan with this lard paste. Then put the pancake in and flip it from time to time. When both sides of the pancake turn golden brown, you can take it out. Easy, right? Lu Lu explained while pouring the flour into the basin. Easy, I got it. Yu Xiang also reached into the basin and stirred. She even twisted a piece of dough and kneaded it into the shape of a little pig. The master and servant worked together and finally made a pot of browned pancakes. After sprinkling chopped green onions on them, they smelled quite good. As soon as the pancakes were placed on the table, Yu Pinyin came back with the smell of blood on his body. Yu Xiang did not feel uncomfortable at all. She jumped up and hung around his neck. She wrapped her legs tightly around his waist and smiled brightly. I made pancakes for you to eat. I made them with my own hands. She emphasized the word, with my own hands. The anger that lingered in his heart instantly dissipated. Yu Pinyin laughed softly. He held her soft buttocks with both hands and carried her to the Kong bed. The Kong bed table was already full. In addition to a pot of pancakes, there was also a plate of cucumber strips, a plate of shredded green onions and ginger, and a plate of sauce. Yu Xiang came out from her brother's arms. She picked up some cucumber strips, shredded green onions and ginger, and wrapped them in the pancakes. She put them in front of her brother's mouth. Try it and see if it tastes good. Yu Pinyin could swallow it without batting an eyelid if it was made by the little lass herself. Not to mention, the pancakes were crispy, the cucumber was sweet, the shredded green onions and ginger were spicy, and the sauce was thick. It was unexpectedly delicious. He fed the rest of the pancakes to his sister's mouth and sincerely praised, "It's delicious. Your cooking skills are very good." Yu Xiang smiled until her eyes narrowed. She took a big bite and chewed slowly. She asked, "Do you think I'm very virtuous? Do you think you're very lucky to have married me?" "Yes, you're very virtuous. Being able to marry you is the luckiest thing in my life." Yu Pinyin laughed loudly. He leaned over and kissed his sister's oily little mouth. He also licked the sauce off her lips. Yu Xiang put down the pancake and earnestly asked, brother, I want a pancake-flavored kiss. Can you give it to me now? Yu Pinyin laughed even louder. In the end, he pried open his sister's bright red lips and sucked deeply. After parting his lips, he said in a hoarse voice, "Little demon, how can you be so cute? Brother can't wait to eat you. Then you can eat." Yu Xiang's eyes flashed. She stood up and moved the Kong bed table to a nearby table. "What do you mean?" Yu Pinyin stopped laughing and said in a hoarse voice. Yu Xiang didn't answer. Instead, she looked at Tao Hong and Lu Lu who were standing at the door. Lu Lu quivered. She hurriedly closed the door and pulled Tao Hong away. Yu Xiang walked over step by step. As she walked, she took off her monk's robe and untied the cloth binding her chest. Two white and round balls jumped out of the bindings and playfully trembled. Yu Pinyin's eyes didn't have a trace of light. His breathing gradually turned from calm to rapid. The huge thing in his lower abdomen couldn't be hidden even through the loose clothes. He pulled the naked little demon into his arms and forcefully pinched her slender waist. He bit her earlobe and asked in a deep voice, "Xianger, do you know what you're doing? The battlefield is constantly changing. If you give it to me and I die on the battlefield, how will you live in the future?" Of course, Yu Xiang had considered this problem before. When she stepped out of the capital, she was already prepared to face death. She was a stubborn person. Once she fell in love, she would disregard everything else. Morality, ethics, etiquette, justice, and honor were all not within her scope of consideration. She wanted to come, so she came. It was that simple. Before I came, I was thinking. She raised her small face and gently blew into her brother's ear. Her sweet and soft voice was filled with righteousness. "I must find you. If you're alive, I want to see you. If you're dead, I want to see your corpse. If I find your corpse, I'll pierce it into your heart and continue accompanying you in the Yellow Springs." She took out the golden hairpin in her hair and pressed it against her heart. She continued, "If I can't find your corpse, I'll keep searching until I die of exhaustion." Seeing that her brother's eyes were red and revealing a rare fragile state, she leaned over and kissed the corner of his eyes. She softly said, "Fortunately, the heavens favored us and allowed us to meet peacefully. We're on the battlefield. Every day counts. What's the point of thinking so much? If you die in battle, wait for me on the bridge of helplessness for 2 months. If I'm pregnant with your child, I'll raise it. If I'm not pregnant, I'll immediately go down to accompany you. You're not the only one who wants to eat me. I also want to eat you. If you don't believe me, you can touch me." She held her brother's large hand and moved it downwards. It was wet and slippery. This was the most moving words of love in the world. Every word of her confession was like a sledgehammer, violently shaking the defenses of his heart. Yu Pinyin fell into ecstasy and was unable to restrain himself. He snatched the golden hairpin from her hand and threw it far away. Then, he pressed her down on the couch and tore the thin monk robe into pieces. Her reactions were so straightforward and cute. When she was in pain, she would bite and kick and quietly sob. When she was in pleasure, she would immediately use her hands and feet to climb up, following his rhythm and pounding. The desire that had accumulated for more than 20 years was released. Wave after wave of pleasure drove people crazy. Yu Pinyin's eyes were scarlet red. Like a wolf, he stared at the girl with a happy expression below him. He wished he could die inside her body. It turned out that flying with the person he loved was such an extreme pleasure. He only wanted to sink into oblivion and never wake up again. Chapter 126. The second prince of Western Yi was born after the Yuan dynasty and was deeply doted on by the emperor and empress. In addition, he defeated the Han army when he first entered the battlefield. He won 2 cities in a row and even killed Yupinian, who was known as the invincible god of war. As long as he returned alive, the throne would be his. Therefore, the first prince, the third prince, and the fourth prince were anxious. One after another, they sent troops to force the emperor to abdicate. By the time the news of Yupinian capturing the second prince came, it was already too late. The several princes had already formed a blood feud that was difficult to reverse. The various tribes of Western Yi were also torn apart. As the saying goes, take advantage of your illness to take your life. Yupinian timely sent troops to the west, directly flattened the Western Yi imperial court, and took the heads of the empress, the third and fourth princes. The first prince led the remaining troops to the more desolate desert. If he wanted to restore his former glory, he would need to recuperate for several decades. Yupinian cleaned up the battlefield and rewarded the officers and soldiers. Only then did he write a letter to Emperor Qingkong to report his victory. Emperor Qingkong received a secret report from the Dragonscale Guard. He was overjoyed and ordered him to immediately return to the capital. However, he did not announce this good news to the outside world. He only sent someone to inform the imprisoned crown prince. The current imperial court of the Great Han Dynasty was also in chaos. The crown prince's officials were impeached and attacked every day. The days were very difficult. The fifth prince and the sixth prince, who had always been mediocre, suddenly became active. They won over a large number of officials to speak for the new crown prince. On one hand, they tried to curry favor with their imperial father. On the other hand, they attacked each other. Emperor Qingkong coldly watched and shook his head at the performance of the two princes. The person who could slowly infiltrate the Dragonscale Guard and defeat the crown prince and Yupinian in one fell swoop should not be so impetuous. The mastermind behind the scenes was not the two princes. On the contrary, the fourth prince had remained silent from beginning to end. He did not win over the officials, nor did he deliberately curry favor with him. Instead, he did his best to plead for mercy for the crown prince and Yupinian. He did not forget to visit the crown prince every day, causing the officials who supported the crown prince to turn to him. Because only when the fourth prince, who was related to the crown prince, ascended to the throne would they have a chance to survive. His performance could be said to be perfect, but the more perfect it was, the more suspicious it was. To be able to rope in nearly half of the officials in the imperial court without making a sound and without causing the fifth prince and the sixth prince to feel apprehensive, his methods were truly shrewd and ruthless. Emperor Qingkang's vigilance towards his son had been raised to the extreme. If it wasn't for the crown prince's foresight, and if it wasn't for Yupinian's luck, he would have fallen into this elaborate trap. First, he would have abandoned the crown prince. When he came back to his senses, he would have abandoned the fifth prince and the sixth prince. Then, he would have naturally passed the throne to this filial son. Emperor Qingkang's methods were shrewd and ruthless, and his eyes were sharp. How could the young fourth prince compare to him? He didn't need any evidence. Just based on intuition and conjecture, he had already determined the real culprit. He also sent secret troops to closely monitor the fourth prince. He didn't care about the disputes in the imperial court. He only wanted to coldly distinguish who was loyal and who was treacherous among the officials. When Yupinian returned to the imperial court, he would use those who needed to be used, and clean up those who needed to be cleaned up. He would hand over a clean imperial court to the crown prince. His life's work could be considered complete. When Yupinian received the secret edict, he immediately summoned all the generals to discuss the matter of returning to the capital. Su Mao refused to confess. Even when Yupinian personally interrogated him, he clenched his teeth and didn't say a word. He even bit his tongue several times to commit suicide. Fortunately, someone discovered him in time and removed his lower jaw, saving his life. Yupinian had no choice but to lock him in a cage and bring him back to the capital for Emperor Qingkong to make a decision. After confirming the time to break camp and return to the capital with the generals, He walked towards the small courtyard bathed in the afterglow of the setting sun. The courtyard was filled with the aroma of food. Tao Hong and Lu Lu placed the bowls and plates on the Kong table. Yu Xiang walked out of the kitchen with an apron tied around her waist and a bit of black dust stuck to the tip of her nose. Seeing her brother, her eyes lit up. She greeted him with a smile. "You came back at the right time. I was just about to ask Tao Hong to call you for lunch." At noon, Master Kuhai and Master Ku Hui came to say goodbye to you. They said they were going to Guyu country to cultivate. Since you weren't here, I had people prepare a lot of dry rations and monk robes. I also sent a group of soldiers to send them to the border. Yu Pinyin skillfully hugged her slender waist and used his finger to rub the tip of her nose. He smiled and said, "Then I've been rude. When we return to the capital, help me go to the Zhenghua temple and add more incense to it." "Okay, I'll do it." Yu Xiang nodded. She pulled her brother to the Kong table and sat down. She wrapped the thinly sliced roast duck, cucumber, shredded onions, peanut butter, and other ingredients into a large pancake and rolled it up. Yu Pinyin looked at the large pancake that was about to be fed to his lips. His expression was slightly hesitant. "What's wrong?" Yu Xiang blinked her eyes in confusion. Yu Pinyin took a bite and said softly, "Xianger, it seems like we've been eating large pancakes for more than 2 months. Shouldn't we change to something else?" "I've changed." Yu Xiang tapped her bowl with her chopsticks and said, "The day before yesterday, we ate beef rolls. Yesterday, we ate chicken rolls. Today, we ate duck rolls. Every day, we make different things. How can we change?" "I'm asking if we can change it to something like rice or stir-fry," Yu Pinyin suggested. Yu Xiang was silent. She stole a few glances at him before she reluctantly said, "I want to change, but I only know how to make pancakes. I don't know how to cook other dishes. I can't cook meat properly, and I always burn vegetables. Sometimes, I cook rice into thin porridge, and sometimes I cook rice crust. It's not presentable at all. I'm still learning. I used to be such a delicate porcelain doll. Because of you, I'm even getting calluses on my fingers. What are you still dissatisfied with?" As she spoke, she felt wronged. She spread her white and tender hands on the table. Yu Pinyin took her hands and looked. Sure enough, there were some places where her skin was scraped. His heart instantly ached. He pulled her onto his lap and kissed and coaxed her. "My little sweetheart, don't do these things anymore. Let Tao Hong and Lu Lu take care of you. A porcelain doll like you should be held in my arms and pampered every day." As he spoke, he kissed all 10 of her fingers. His actions were indescribably gentle. "But I like to wash my hands and make soup for you. Isn't this the duty of a wife?" Yu Xiang was no longer wronged. She snuggled into her brother's arms. "Whatever you like. I'll eat whatever you make. I'll eat pancakes you make for the rest of my life." Yu Pinyin smiled happily. He never knew that he could say such mushy words of love. However, when it came to his sister, making her happy seemed to be a kind of duty and instinct. Yu Xiang glared at him and snorted. She was clearly very happy, but she had to put on a front. Yu Pinyin loved her little appearance to death. His large hand reached under her clothes and stroked the soft flesh of her waist. He kneaded her into a puddle of spring water and melted her into his arms. The two of them kicked the Kong table away and hugged each other. When they were done, Yu Xiang was already as soft as mud. She could only rest her head on her jade arm and gasp for breath. Yu Pinyin twisted the handkerchief to help her tidy up, but her naughty little foot kicked the soft part of his body. He immediately felt it again. "Little devil, you still want me to tidy you up?" He gritted his teeth and whispered. "We have to leave tomorrow. The journey is inconvenient. I need to eat more." Yu Xiang licked her dark red lips. Her charming eyes hooked towards her brother. She had always been carefree. She lived as she pleased and didn't care about feudal etiquette at all. She had just experienced the joy of the pleasure of fish and water. Naturally, she didn't feel satisfied no matter how much she enjoyed it. What Yu Pinyin loved the most was her fiery passion. She was frank and straightforward. He chuckled and pressed down on her. The two of them were still on their way back to the capital when there was a new disturbance in the court. Because the Prime Minister was the backbone of the Crown Prince's support, if the other princes wanted to ascend the throne, they naturally had to remove this block. Under the incitement of the princes, memorials to impeach the Prime Minister flew like snowflakes to Emperor Qingkang's desk. Among them, there was one that caught the attention of Emperor Qingkang. It was to reverse the verdict of Yu Junwei, who had been exiled to Shu. Yu Junwei was Yu Pinyin's third uncle. He was the son of a concubine of the matriarch. In the past, he had been the Minister of Appointments. Later, the Prime Minister impeached him for selling his position and accepting bribes. After his crimes were verified, his entire family was exiled. The witness from that year unexpectedly retracted his testimony, saying that everything was fabricated by Yu Pinyin and the Crown Prince in order to seize the title of nobility. Because his entire family's lives were in the hands of Yu Pinyin, he had no choice but to go against his conscience and frame a loyal subject. Now that Yu Pinyin was dead, the threat to his family had been removed. Only then did he stand up to atone for his past crimes. When this matter spread, it caused an uproar in the imperial court. Many people impeached the Prime Minister and Marquis Yongle. Even Marquis Yongle's birth mother, the Lin clan, stood up to testify for Yu Pinyin's family. They described in detail how Yu Pinyin had fabricated all sorts of crimes to frame his uncle. When the matriarch heard the news, she was so angry that she vomited blood. Yu Xiu wanted nothing more than to burn down the Lin residence. Fortunately, she was pulled back by Mama Ma. In the Crown Prince mansion, Emperor Qingkang and the Crown Prince were playing chess. Emperor Qingkang placed down a chess piece and sighed, "He Feng really has poor affinity with his parents." He was actually framed by his own birth mother to this extent. What exactly is the Lin clan thinking? I don't know. They've probably gone crazy. The Crown Prince rubbed his temples in distress. Emperor Qingkang lowered his head and drank tea. He said, "Old Fourth is coming more and more frequently." The Crown Prince sneered, "That's right." His words are full of encouragement and consolation. I'm very moved. I've advised him many times to fight for that position, but he refused to comment. Emperor Qingkang also laughed. He ate a chess piece and said in a fleeting tone, "He's waiting for you to surrender. What's the point of your mouth moving up and down?" It was time to give him something substantial. If you don't use your connections now, they'll be useless in the future. If Old Fifth and Old Sixth take the throne, you'll definitely die. That's why I can only rely on Fourth Brother now. Only when Fourth Brother takes the throne can I live. Don't you think so, Father? The Crown Prince's tone was light. Emperor Qingkang nodded, his eyes full of murderous intent. The memorial to overturn Yu Junwei's case was quickly approved by Emperor Qingkang. Not only did he imprison the Prime Minister on the same day, he also sent people to Shu to bring Yu Junwei's family back to the capital. This matter quickly spread to everyone. They all said that Family Yu's third branch's suffering was finally over. If things went smoothly, not only would Yu Junwei be reinstated, he might even inherit the title of Marquis Yongle. Chapter 127. Yu Pinyin led the army back to the capital and did not show his face all the way. Because Emperor Qingkang deliberately blocked the news, no one knew that the Westerny people were about to be exterminated by other tribes. The courtiers thought about the army the most every day. Today you impeach me, tomorrow I impeach you. They were all fighting endlessly for the merit of ascending to the throne. Emperor Cheng Kong was very happy to see this, but in fact, the butcher knife in his hand was already raised high. The army would arrive at the capital in a few days. Yu Pinyin had no choice but to send his sister back first to deceive others. As the two of them talked, they kissed again. Just saying goodbye took almost an hour. It was only when Liulu risked her life to urge the two of them to separate. Because she was a girl, she could not always live in Zhenghua Temple. Therefore, 2 months after she left, Shen Yuanqi ordered a servant to disguise as her and return to the Shenfu. Then, he announced to the public that his sister was seriously ill and refused to see guests. Yu Xiang sneaked into the Shenfu through the corner gate and saw Shen Yuanqi staring at her with a dark expression. "You're back." He walked over and looked at his sister from head to toe. "Are you well?" "I'm well, I can't be better." Yu Xiang smiled with squinted eyes. Shen Yuanqi could not bear to see her sweet appearance and scolded with a fierce face, "Quickly freshen up and go out to see the 9th princess." "Little Jiu, why are you here? Didn't you say that I was seriously ill and refused to see guests? The 9th princess's body is priceless. If she insists on coming in, how can I stop her?" Shen Yuanqi's dark expression faintly revealed a smile, and his tone softened. "The 9th princess is loyal and righteous. After knowing the truth, she tried her best to cover it up for you. Thanks to her frequent visits to you these past few months, no one suspected anything. Otherwise, if word got out, your reputation would be ruined. If they want to say it, let them say it. I won't lose a piece of meat. Anyway, no matter what others say, Big Brother will never abandon me." Seeing his brother glaring at him, Yu Xiang hurriedly changed his words. "But I still have to thank little Jill, I'll clean up and go see her." Only then was Shen Yuanqi satisfied. He went to the side hall to report to the 9th princess. Because the 9th princess would visit the Fu every 3 to 5 days, and because his younger sister wasn't here, he couldn't just let her sit there and do nothing. Therefore, Shen Yuanqi had no choice but to put aside the etiquette between men and women and talk to her. Over time, he actually began to like the innocent the 9th princess a lot more. Time was short, so Yu Xiang only washed his face, changed his clothes, and hurried to the side hall, just in time to hear the 9th princess giggling happily. After leaving the hustle and bustle of the battlefield, this burst of laughter instantly caused her eyes to turn red. "Xianger, you're back." The 9th princess saw her best friend and immediately pounced on her. She pinched her arm and said, "You've lost weight. Come and eat something." Yu Xiang staggered from her pouncing. Only then did he realize that she had gained a lot of weight after not seeing her for a few months. Her face was round, and her white skin was tender, like a crystal bun. "The 9th princess is right. Why haven't you come and eat yet? These past few months, you've been eating dry rations. It's been a long time since you've eaten a meal of white rice, right?" Shen Yuanqi was very distressed. As he spoke, he ordered the servants to prepare food and wine. In order to avoid arousing suspicion, he said a few words and then left. "Don't go." Before the 9th princess finished speaking, he had already left. His tall and handsome back that was like bamboo went farther and farther away. "Don't look. My big brother is very polite. Taking time out every day to say a few words to you is already the limit." Yu Xiang raised one eyebrow and joked, "I've been gone for several months, but it seems like you're not worried about me at all. Look, how fat have you become? You said you came to see me, but in reality, you came to see my big brother, right?" The 9th princess hurriedly glanced at the palace maid standing by the door. When she saw that they didn't hear Yu Xiang's whispers, she sighed in relief and said with a red face, "You're so smart. You even guessed it. Lord Shen is so handsome. He's the most handsome man in all of the great Han dynasty. I can't get enough of looking at him. Did you know that every time he sent me away after I finished eating the pastries? In order to stay a little longer, I ate as much as I could, and that's why I became fat. I was also worried about you, but Imperial Father and Imperial Mother both said that you were fine. Yu Xiang pinched her chubby double chin. While holding back his laughter, he said, so it turns out that you've suffered so much. Don't worry, in the future, you can come and see if you want to. I definitely won't force you to eat. Whenever you've seen enough, I'll send you back. Imperial Father is right. Xianger, you're really loyal. The 9th princess beamed with joy. She gave her a thumbs up and continued, then what do you think about me being your sister-in-law? Yu Xiang was drinking tea. When he heard her words, he almost choked to death. When he finally caught his breath, he covered her mouth and warned, Princess Shang, this isn't a small matter. You mustn't say this outside. Otherwise, my big brother will be roasted on a fire. Your marriage will be decided by your imperial father. You don't have the final say. The 9th princess was listless. She felt that the pastries were tasteless. After sitting for a short while, she got up and bid farewell. Before she left, she mumbled that she would come back tomorrow. After Yu Xiang returned to her room, she immediately took a fragrant flower petal bath. In front of the mirror, she fiddled with the rouge, pearls, hairpins, and other things that she hadn't touched for a long time. Help me apply some nail polish. She placed her hands on the dressing table. Tao Hong and Lulu hurriedly took out small bowls to make balsam flower juice. When they smelled the refreshing fragrance, they suddenly felt as if they were in another world. After applying the nail polish, Liolu, on the spur of the moment, helped her mistress comb her hair into a very delicate and complicated bun. She specially picked out that gorgeous pearl hairpin and inserted it into the bun. She also picked out a bright red silk long dress for her mistress to change into. After Yu Xiang was properly dressed, she drew her eyebrows and lips in front of the mirror. She held a thin sheep hair brush and dipped it in wax and gold powder. Then, she drew a blooming lotus between her eyebrows. She raised her eyebrows slightly and turned to Tao Hong, asking, how is it? Am I beautiful? After rushing about outside for several months, your mistress's appearance hasn't deteriorated, right? Not only hasn't it deteriorated, miss, you've become much more beautiful. I'm simply stunned. Tao Hong gave her 2 thumbs up. Lulu pursed her lips and smiled. Being too beautiful is also a kind of sin. My legs have to be good and bad sometimes. Otherwise, if they're too eye-catching, they'll attract trouble. Yu Xiang held her cheeks and sighed with a smile. The corners of Lulu's lips twitched slightly. What you said really came true. One moment Yu Xiang said that she would attract trouble, the next moment, a little girl came to report that the Sun family had come again. Because of Madame Sun's arrangements, that girl died and left behind a blood letter. However, for the sake of 500 taels of silver and dozens of mu of fertile land, her family refused to help her redress her grievances. If it weren't for the fact that they wanted to continue blackmailing the Sun family, they would have burned the blood letter as well. Shen Yuanqi found that family several times. As soon as he said the words redress her grievances, they cried and made a fuss. They would rather die than comply. Shen Yuanqi had no choice but to pinch his nose and admit it. Who knew that even though he admitted it, Sun Mingjie wouldn't admit it? He had long coveted Yu Xiang's beauty, and considering that she had broken her legs, he could do whatever he wanted with her in bed. If she died, he could just say that she was weak and died of illness. There was simply no more suitable wife candidate than her. Therefore, Sun Mingjie refused to give up and sent Iceman to propose marriage again and again. At first, they were polite, but after Shen Yuanqi was suspended for pleading for the crown prince, the Sun family became arrogant and said that they wanted to take Yu Xiang as a concubine, which made Shen Yuanqi so angry that he almost vomited blood. Yu Xiang listened to the little girl explain the whole story in a few words and walked to the front hall angrily. As soon as she stepped through the threshold, she heard Iceman sneer and say, "Lord Shen, hurry up and agree. If you pass this village, there won't be such a shop. Young Master Sun has now taken up a job in the Ministry of Personnel. Not only is he handsome and elegant, but he also has a great future in front of him. On the other hand, what else does your young miss have besides her looks? Not only is she eccentric, but she also can't walk. Although she has been cured, she can't walk as well as ordinary people. You are still the minister of the Supreme Court. In the future, when the emperor demotes you, it will be extremely difficult to marry your young miss into a family like the Sun family. Because most of the officials in the crown prince's line were abandoned by the emperor, and the prime minister's future was uncertain in the imperial prison, Shen Yuanqi, a foot soldier, would be demoted sooner or later in the eyes of the world. Therefore, this Iceman not only didn't have any respect for Shen Yuanqi, but also faintly despised him. Before Shen Yuanqi could speak, Yu Xiang sneered and asked, "You want me, the dignified Minister of Agriculture, to be a concubine of a lowly official? Where did he get the face to do that? Why don't we go to the palace tomorrow with Madame Sun to see the Empress and ask her if there is a precedent of a Minister of Agriculture being a concubine of a sixth-ranked official in our country? If there is, I have no other choice but to marry into the Sun family. I will have someone send a letter to the Empress to ask for an audience. You go back and tell her that I will be waiting for Madame Sun at the palace gate tomorrow morning. I won't leave until I see her." The bright red brocade robe was blown up and down by the wind, and a strong fragrance hit the face, making people intoxicated. The young girl was originally bright and beautiful, and at this time, her eyes were flashing with anger, making the golden lotus between her eyebrows seem to be burning. This was a kind of breathtaking beauty. Just looking at her, it was as if the eyes were stabbed by a knife, and it was very painful. Iceman subconsciously stood up to greet her, and the arrogance on her face was replaced by fear. How could an ordinary person touch a young girl who was as hot as fire? She couldn't help but think to herself. When she understood the meaning of her words, she was even more scared out of her wits. Family Yu and family Shen were in dire straits, so everyone forgot the identity of Yu Xiang as the Minister of Agriculture. Now that she mentioned it, Iceman thought of this and secretly complained in her heart. It is this servant who is arrogant. How can the Minister of Agriculture be worthy of a mediocre person like young Master Sun? This servant will go back to Madame Sunday. Please don't blame me. Iceman apologized and retreated. As for the appointment to see the Empress tomorrow morning, it was not something she could solve. It was better to let Madame Sun have a headache. She could provoke anyone, but she had to provoke the famous Miss 3U. Although she had changed her surname, her temper had not changed at all. The ninth princess was protecting her. No matter how poor she was not someone who could be bullied by ordinary people. Iceman regretted it, for fear that Yu Xiang would raise her whip and whip her. Fortunately, the Lord Shen stopped her and let her escape unscathed. People are bullying you. Why are you still being a good person? Yu Xiang glared at her brother fiercely. Chapter 128. Yu Xiang and her elder brother sat down to chat. Only then did she know that the Lin clan had helped the third branch to defame Yu Pinyin. She was so angry that she almost broke her teeth. Now, the third branch has been in the capital for almost a month. They live in the courtyard across from Marquis Yongla. Every day, they run around for the sake of redressing their names. In order to overthrow the Prime Minister and completely eliminate the Crown Prince's power in the court, the supporters of the 5th and 6th princes are doing their best to promote this matter. Many people say that not only will Yu Junwei be reinstated, but he will also inherit the title of Marquis Yongla. His eldest son's scholarly achievements will also be restored. In the future, the third branch will be the most prominent branch in Prefecture Yu. The clansmen who were punished by Yu Pinyin are now gathered around Yu Junwei. They have the momentum to support him as the clan leader. He is not as ruthless as Yu Pinyin. After returning, he took the Lin clan and Yu Miaoqi into the Fu to take care of them. He also visits old madam every day, saying that he wants to provide for her. Shen Yuanqi slowly narrated the family Yu's recent situation. Yu Xiang's fingertips trembled as she listened. She fiercely said, "What a good third branch. They are deliberately angering the old ancestor. They are so savage before they have the power. In the future, they will cry. I always thought that the Lin clan still had some feelings for older brother. I didn't expect that as soon as she learned of older brother's death, she would defame his reputation. Does she treat older brother as a son or an enemy? Even a vicious tiger will not eat its cubs. She is worse than a beast." Shen Yuanqi was extremely disdainful of the Lin clan's actions. However, he also felt that it was unfair for his younger sister to favor one and discriminate against the other. He ridiculed, "Yu Pinyin has a mother worse than a beast and a sister who is fickle and unjust." The heavens saw that he was pitiful and helped him by giving him a child bride who is affectionate and righteous. I, Shen Yuanqi, am the most pitiful. I only have a relative who always favors outsiders. She leaves far away without saying a word. It makes me worry every day and unable to sleep. Yu Xiang felt very apologetic after hearing what he said. She hurriedly hugged him and teased him. The longer the brother and sister got along, the more they felt that their personalities were congenial to each other. Their initial restraint and alienation had long since been replaced by intimacy. After Yu Xiang coaxed his brother, he immediately prepared a gift and went to the suburbs of the capital to visit the old lady. On the other side, Yu Miaoqi was dressing up in her room. Behind her stood two beautiful maidservants, both of whom were bought by Yu Junwei's wife, Madame Zhuo. "Miss, which one of these head ornaments do you like?" The two maidservants each held 2 boxes in their hands, which were filled with luxurious head ornaments decorated with gems and pearls. Although the third branch had just returned to the capital, because Yu Junwei was expected to be reinstated and regained his title, and because the two princes were deliberately trying to rope him in, there was an endless stream of high officials and nobles who came to visit. At the same time, they also sent many valuable gifts. They had suffered a lot in Shu County for several years. When they came back, they only carried a few parcels and looked very down and out. However, in less than a month, they had everything. They only needed to wait for the emperor's imperial edict to redress the injustice. Then, they would be able to open the sealed Marquis Yongle across the street and live in a grand manner. Therefore, although these sets of head ornaments were expensive, they were nothing to the third branch's family. Yu Miaoqi pointed at the exquisite Luan and Phoenix jadeite head ornaments and slowly said, "Wear this set. It matches my dress very well." The maidservants busily took out the head ornaments and helped her pin them in her hair. Right at this time, the Lin clan lifted the curtain and came in. She walked to the dressing table and seemed to want to say something, but then hesitated. In just a few short months, she had lost a lot of weight. Her originally white skin was dry and sallow, and her forehead was covered with fine wrinkles. She looked as if she had aged several decades. Yu Miaoqi saw the interest in her eyes and waved her hand to send the maidservants away. She said impatiently, "What's wrong with you now?" "Nothing. I just feel uneasy being alone, so I thought I might as well come and see you." The Lin clan sat on the embroidered stool and sighed. Her face was full of confusion and helplessness. "Then take a good look. Your daughter will soon be a phoenix in flight." Yu Miaoqi used her fingertips to touch the Luan and Phoenix hairpin made of jadeite and gold thread on her head. Her voice was very proud. "When the dust settles, that person will take me into the palace. Based on my contributions, I can at least be conferred the title of consort. When I have a meteoric rise, I'll have that old thing take you back in a grand manner." You have to keep the letter of divorce well. When the time comes, I'll have her swallow it whole. Don't. You must not anger old ancestor. She is my mother-in-law and your grandmother. The Lin clan repeatedly waved her hand and said worriedly, Yandere's corpse hasn't even turned cold, yet I'm already helping the third branch to slander his reputation. If your father knew in the underworld, would he blame me? Didn't I tell you? Right now, my status is too low. Only by allying with third uncle can I compete with the other noble daughters. You help third uncle take back his title, and he sends me into the palace. We're just using each other. In the future, when I give birth to a prince and ascend to the empress position, I will definitely help eldest brother clear his name. I still remember how third uncle framed eldest brother. I won't forgive him. When the time comes, I'll just say that third uncle used my life to force you to falsely accuse your son. Other people will understand. If eldest brother doesn't have an heir, I will definitely adopt a talented child from the clan for you to raise and inherit eldest brother's title. You don't need to care about the slander of outsiders. You also don't need to care about third uncle's family. Daughter will take care of it. Yu Miaoqi patiently explained. The Lin clan listened in silence and only pinched their handkerchiefs to wipe their tears. Madame Zhua's sharp voice came from outside the door. Yu Miaoqi hurriedly sat up straight and fixed her hair in front of the mirror. Are you done dressing? If you're done, let's set out. Madame Zhua lifted the curtain and walked in. She walked 2 laps around Yu Miaoqi and praised, really has a good appearance. No wonder noble lady likes you so much and repeatedly told me to take good care of you. Do you like the 4 sets of head ornaments that were just sent over? If you don't, have the shopkeeper of Splendid Pavilion make another trip until he's satisfied. Thank you, Auntie. Miaoqi likes them very much. Did noble lady have a message for me? Yu Miaoqi's cheeks flushed red and her eyes were filled with shyness. He did. He told you to be at ease and wait. As long as this matter is over, he will definitely welcome you into the palace with 8 palanquins. Madame Zhua smiled sincerely, but there was endless ridicule hidden in the depths of her eyes. That person had made friends with Yu Miaoqi in order to deal with Yu Pinyin. Now that Yu Pinyin was dead, Yu Miaoqi was dispensable. Not to mention 8 palanquins, it was already good enough that he remembered her. If it weren't for the fact that the master had the idea of climbing up to the new emperor and insisted on sending one of the family Yu's daughters into the palace, if it weren't for the fact that her daughter was already married in Shu, if it weren't for the fact that Yu Miaoqi was truly beautiful and elegant, she definitely wouldn't have accepted this pair of mother and daughter. Yu Miaoqi seemed to be touched. She slightly lowered her eyes and smiled faintly. The two once again fixed their makeup and ignored the Lin clan in the corner. They sat in the carriage and headed straight for the suburbs of the capital. The third branch had finally made it through. Naturally, they wanted to vent their anger in front of the matriarch. On the surface, Madame Zhua urged the matriarch to live with them, but in reality, every word she said brought up Yu Pinyin's death. She wanted nothing more than to anger the matriarch to death. They brought many servants with them and easily broke open the door to the inner hall. The matriarch was drinking medicine. When she saw who it was, she directly threw the medicine bowl at them and cursed, "Slut, you still dare to come. Mother, calm down. Don't vomit blood like last time. Look at what kind of place you're living in. The walls are moldy. Why don't you come home with me?" Master received news that in 3 days, the edict to reinstate his position and inherit his title will be issued. The seal on Marquis Yongla's door can also be opened. You've lived there your whole life. It's time for you to go back. Madame Zhua dodged the medicine bowl and sat in a Taisha chair, talking to herself. Grandmother, no matter who is in charge of the Marquis household, you are still our elder. We will definitely be filial to you. Although eldest brother has passed away, there is still brother Hong. Both of them are your grandsons. Yu Miaoqi sat next to Madame Zhua and smiled faintly. The brother Hong she spoke of was Yu Junwei's legitimate son, Yu Pinhong. Right now, he was studying at home, preparing to return to his official career. The matriarch was so angry at these two that her heart ached. She roared, "Someone come, beat these two damn things out of here." However, the servants of the Marquis household had either left or scattered. The remaining people were the elderly, the weak, the women, and the children. They were really powerless against the young servants brought by the third branch. The servants pushed and shoved each other. Yu Miaoqi and Madame Zhuo were still in the mood to drink tea and watch the show. When Yu heard the news, she hurried over. Just as she reached the fork in the road, she saw the door open again. Yu Xiang, wearing a bright red silk dress embroidered with golden silk, slowly walked in. A gust of wind blew, blowing the strong scent of flowers onto Yu's face. She involuntarily took a deep breath and shouted in surprise, "Xiang. You're back." "I'm back." Yu Xiang was about to raise her lips when she heard the noise in the inner hall. Her face immediately darkened. "Who has the guts to fight with my old ancestor?" She untied the barbed whip from her waist and fiercely whipped at a servant. That person immediately covered his face and howled miserably. Blood flowed out from between his fingers. Everyone was silent for a moment. They involuntarily opened up a path for her to walk to the front of the hall. "Xiang. Is that you, Xiang?" The matriarch stared at her in disbelief. "It's me. Old ancestor, I've come to see you." She quickly stepped forward and hugged the matriarch. She leaned over and whispered in her ear, "Gage is also fine. Now that he has defeated Shi, he will return to the capital the day after tomorrow. The emperor has his own arrangements. You must not say anything right now." The matriarch trembled. She immediately hugged her and cried bitterly. She cried and repented, "Xiang, it's good that you can come to see me. I'm old and muddle-headed, that's why I did something wrong. You must not hold a grudge against me." "How could I? I can hold a grudge against anyone, but I can't hold a grudge against my own old ancestor. We will always be a family." Yu Xiang also felt something in her heart, and her eyes slowly turned red. Yu pushed away the servants and walked over. The three of them hugged each other and cried bitterly. "Yu Xiang, you're finally here. I thought you didn't plan on recognizing your grandmother in this lifetime." Yu Miaoqi broke the reunion scene of the three people. "A few days ago, my leg injury relapsed and I urgently needed to seek medical treatment, so I was delayed for a few months. I'm not like you, an ungrateful and heartless white-eyed wolf." Yu Xiang helped the matriarch sit up straight and helped her pour a cup of ginseng tea. Only then did she slowly open her mouth. Yu Miaoqi angrily glared. Just as she was about to refute, she heard Madame Zhua sneer, "Yu Xiang, oh no, look at my memory. You should be called Shen Xiang now. Your surname is Shen, and our surname is Yu. What right do you have to meddle in family use matters? You even injured my family's servants the moment you arrived. You're really shameless. Do you really think you're the Marquis Yongla's D Miss Third? I don't think I'm the Marquis household's D Miss Third. I only think of myself as the Marquis household's official Marchioness." Of course, Yu Xiang still couldn't say this out loud. She could only cover her mouth and laugh, "I really do have a big face. Madame Zhua, have you forgotten? Although I'm no longer the Marquis household's D Missy, I still have the title of Minister of Agriculture above my head. If we're talking about rank, you have to kneel and salute when you see me." Chapter 129. Yu Xiang had been in seclusion for several months. Outsiders thought that she had lost her status as the D-Miss of the Marquis household, so she was ashamed to see people. However, they all forgot that although the D-Miss of the Marquis household had a high status, it was not higher than the village lord. The emperor had never issued an edict to strip her of her title, so she was still the village lord. Ordinary women like Madame Joie and Yumiauchi, who had no rank or rank, had to kneel and greet her as the village lord Nyang Nyang. At this time, the two of them were struggling between kneeling and not kneeling. Their facial features were twisted with resentment and unwillingness, making them look very terrifying. Yu Xiang slowly fed the old Tai Tai tea. After a while, she berated in a deep voice, "These brats don't know etiquette. Beat them out of here." Mama Ma and the others seemed to have found their backbone. They picked up sticks, brooms, feather dusters, and other things, and aggressively beat them up. Madame Joie could not order the servants to fight back. If they bumped into Yu Xiang in the chaos, the matter would become big. She could only lift her skirt and run away with her tail between her legs. Yu Xiang was still unwilling to give up. She shouted at their fleeing figures, "Madame Joie, I'll kindly warn you. Yumiauchi killed her adoptive mother, secretly harmed her adoptive brother, framed her D-sister, and colluded with her biological mother to frame her D-brother. Her coldness and viciousness are rarely seen in the world. If you have any intentions of using her, be careful that in the end, you'll be eaten by her until not even your bones are left." Madame Joie's footsteps paused. When she crossed the threshold, she tripped. Yumiauchi quickly reached out to help her, but she slapped her hand away. It was clear that her words had already entered her heart. However, Yumiauchi urgently needed the third branch's power to help her ascend to the position of imperial concubine. When she returned, she would rack her brains to curry favor. If she could not make her lower her guard, then the family you would change the person she sent into the palace. Glory, splendor, wealth, and rank could be overturned because of these words. Yumiauchi's hatred for Yu Xiang could be imagined. She had made up her mind to make Yu Xiang suffer a fate worse than death once she achieved meteoric success. When everyone had left, the old lady hugged her granddaughter in her arms again and patted her. She called her "darling" non-stop and repeatedly asked if she had suffered along the way. "With the care of Master Kuhai and Master Ku Hui, your granddaughter didn't suffer. Gage is also doing very well. He will arrive in the capital in a few days." Yu Xiang told the old lady everything that had happened after he left for Shijiang. The old lady's tears kept flowing as she said firmly, "Okay, okay, okay. It doesn't matter if you win or lose on the battlefield, as long as you can go home safely, it's fine. In the future, old ancestor will go to the Zhenghua temple to ask for an auspicious day for you and Yen to hold your wedding ceremony. I have already spoken with the Lord Shen. I will pay for the betrothal gifts and dowry. I will definitely let you have boundless glory with your red dowry. As for what sibling incest, let those mediocre people talk about it. We just have to care about living our lives." Yu Xiang was overjoyed. She hugged the old lady's neck and acted coquettishly, "Old ancestor, you still love me. In the future, I will definitely help you give birth to a nest of great-grandchildren. We will have 4 generations under the same roof. What do you say?" The old lady's heart was filled with sweetness. She smiled until her eyes couldn't be seen and repeatedly agreed. Yu Xiu also smiled, but 2 lines of tears flowed from the corners of her eyes. The old lady was very distressed when she saw this and hurriedly hugged her to comfort her. "Xiao Xianzai, that child is affectionate. I think he is a good person. When your eldest brother comes back, we will hold your wedding again. It will be 100 times grander and livelier than before. Our whole family will borrow your happy occasion to wash away the bad luck." And Yu Xiu hurriedly lowered her head to wipe her tears. After Zhuoshi returned home, she immediately left Shen Miaoqi and went to find Yu Junwei. The two previously saw that the noble person had a bit of interest in Yu Miaoqi and thus chose to send her over. Now that Yu Xiang pointed it out, they realized how ungrateful Yu Miaoqi was. Even her adoptive father, adoptive mother, adoptive brother, legitimate brother, legitimate brother, legitimate sister, and legitimate grandmother did not even blink an eye. Her heart was simply made of stone and could not be warmed no matter what. Now that she was in dire straits, she would naturally be gentle and obedient. When she gained power, she might stab her in the back. After staying in Shu for so long, my brain has also been damaged by the hard work. I actually thought of sending her over. Yu Junwei looked at his calloused hands and sighed. After 6 to 7 years of hard labor, he had even forgotten the art of observing people. Then let's choose someone else. There is no one more beautiful than her in the clan. Let's go outside and find someone or adopt a talented child from a branch family for a few years. If you return to your official position, the noble person will need to rely on you. Even if you don't mention it, he will ask himself. In any case, the noble person is still young and is not in a hurry. Zhuosher's face showed a hint of arrogance. Yu Junwei was a Shu son and relied on his own ability to participate in the imperial examinations and become an official. At the age of 30, he became the Minister of Appointments. His ability was not to be doubted. If he was not too conceited and greedy, he would not have been pulled down by others. In order to stabilize the throne, the new emperor had to take in a few daughters of the influential families into the palace. The important position of the Minister of Appointments naturally had to be shared. Yu Junwei thought that when he became the emperor's father-in-law, it would be difficult for others to take him down. Moreover, he had the intention of using the Lin clan. Thus, he pinched his nose and took in the mother and daughter pair. Now that he had new considerations, he felt very uncomfortable and said, "That old thing seems to have already divorced the Lin clan. Then our family Yu has no obligation to support her. When the noble person is done, you can send them far away." "I know." Zhuosher nodded and hurried down to find a beautiful young girl. Yu Miaoqi heard that Zhuosher had summoned the clansmen to see him, and each of them brought their own daughters. They were all between the ages of 11 and 12. How could he not understand what she was planning? He was so angry that his eyes turned red. However, the noble person had repeatedly warned her not to meet him before the great cause was accomplished. She could only grit her teeth and endure. In her heart, she was only thinking that the noble person was still thinking about her. When Yu Pinyin was here, she felt very humble. Without Yu Pinyin, she found that she was as humble as dust. Like her, Madame Sun was also unable to calm down. After hearing Iceman's report, she remembered that Yu Xiang still had the title of Minister of Agriculture. She was so scared that she broke out in a cold sweat. "Mother, why are you in such a hurry? The crown prince has been imprisoned, and the empress is in seclusion. Kuan Ning Palace refuses to see guests. The two of them couldn't even protect themselves. How could they care about the family Shin's business? Let her go. Let's see what she can come up with. I like such a strong woman. It's fun to play with." Sun Mingjie licked his fingertips. His feminine face had a bit of ruthlessness. Madame Sun felt relieved when she heard this. She sneered and said, "My son is right. She went to beg the empress, and I went to beg my sister-in-law. My sister-in-law is deeply favored by the emperor and is pregnant with the emperor's child. Could it be that she can't suppress an empress who is about to be deposed?" It turned out that the lord's son also had a younger sister who was 16 years old. She entered the palace during the election last year. Because of her outstanding appearance, she was quickly bedded. Now, she was 7 or 8 months pregnant. She was pregnant with Emperor Cheng Kang's youngest child. Therefore, she was very favored by Emperor Cheng Kang. A month ago, she was promoted several ranks, from a small 5th-rank Liangyuan to a 1st-rank concubine. This was also why Madame Sun dared to be so rampant. Chapter 130. When Yuxiang left, it was midsummer, and when she returned, it was the 12th lunar month of winter. Outside, the northern wind was howling, and it could be said that a drop of water would turn into ice. The palace of Gongquan was surrounded by man-made lakes. During the 3 seasons of spring, summer, and autumn, the dark blue lake water was hidden between a vast sea of green trees. The scenery was intoxicating. However, once winter came, the lake water would freeze into ice. From afar, it looked white. It was beautiful, but it made people feel cold to the bone. The palace burned the earth and lit the braziers, but Consort Sun was still wrapped in a fox fur cloak. Her already bulging belly was even more shocking. Her appearance was elegant, and her skin was white. At this time, she was lazily reclining on a soft couch. Because of her successive promotions, her brows were relaxed, and she naturally carried a bit of arrogance and nobility. "Nyang Nyang, your belly looks sharp. You must be pregnant with Xiao Longzi," Consort Sun said attentively. Consort Sun rubbed her belly and smiled, "Is that so? It doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman. In any case, this child is blessed. Why did sister-in-law come to the palace this time?" Consort Sun hurriedly told her about how Yuxiang had failed to become a concubine and had changed the betrothal gift to her. Consort Sun frowned, "Of all the girls to marry, why did you choose Yuxiang? She has already returned to the family, and her brother is about to be removed from his position. Her adopted brother died without a complete corpse, and his title has fallen. Not to mention her own temperament, her legs are inconvenient, and she has a chronic illness. What benefits does Yu Mingjie have by marrying her? This consort can help Mingjie pick anyone who is 100 times better than her. Nyang Nyang, you don't know, but Mingjie likes fiery girls like her. He says it's more fun to play with them. How would this subject dare to let him get close to a girl from a good family? It's better to marry Yuxiang and let Mingjie torment her for a few years to dissipate the evil in his heart. When Mingjie's temperament stabilizes, let her suddenly die, and then we can marry another noble girl." Consort Sun lowered her voice as she replied. Sun Fei was naturally aware of her nephew's problem and had even helped him cover it up. After hearing this, she thought for a moment and felt that using Yuxiang to temper her nephew's temperament was also a good idea. Family Shen and family Yu had both fallen. Who would care about Yuxiang's life and death? Alright then. This consort will summon Yuxiang over to take a look. Consort Sun waved her hand and had a palace maid go to Cunning Palace to invite her over. She was now the only woman in the palace who was pregnant, and she had been promoted by Emperor Qing Kong for 2 months in a row. The speed of her promotion was rarely seen in the world. Not to mention the other imperial concubines being envious, jealous, and hateful toward her, even she herself felt like she was floating in the air. She thought that Emperor Qing Kong doted on her and her child so much that she even had the idea of begging Emperor Qing Kong to confer her a title of prince as soon as she was born. Moreover, she had already boarded the new emperor's ship. Even if Emperor Qing Kong had passed away, she and her child would still live comfortably under the new emperor's care, unparalleled in riches and honor. Therefore, she gradually forgot her duties and didn't put the empress in her eyes. Otherwise, she wouldn't have sent a little palace maid to Cunning Palace to ask for her. If this was a normal situation, it would be so arrogant that it would make people speechless. Of course, in the past few months that the Empress had been in seclusion, she had also experienced many similar provocations. In the past, she had silently endured it, but today, she couldn't tolerate it anymore. Therefore, without waiting for Consort Sun's palace maid to step out of the inner hall, a female official from Cunning Palace strode in and said, "Her Highness the Empress has issued an imperial decree, reprimanding Consort Sun for not knowing etiquette and not understanding the hierarchy. She is to reflect on her mistakes in Gongquan Palace and kneel for 24 hours before rising. Her Highness, please." The female official bowed and led Consort Sun to the Buddhist hall in the rear hall. Because every emperor of the Great Han dynasty was a devout believer in Buddhism, the imperial concubines in the harem followed suit and set up a Buddhist hall in the palace. When they had nothing to do, they would kneel and recite scriptures to show their compassion. The Buddhist hall in Gongquan Palace was next to Linshui Pavilion. Although the 4 windows were tightly shut, the northern wind continued to blow in through the cracks. The temperature was enough to freeze a layer of flesh off a person. To have consort Sun, a pregnant woman about to give birth, kneel and reflect on herself was equivalent to having her die. When consort Sun heard this, she was so shocked that she almost fell off the soft couch. Consort Sun was even more incredulous. She said that the empress was using her power for personal reasons to harm the imperial heir. She wanted to go to the emperor to complain. The female official didn't stop her and allowed her to run towards Yangxin Palace Hall with a palace maid. Does Her Highness want to go in alone or wait for the emperor to issue an imperial decree? The female official smiled at consort Sun, her attitude very gentle. Wait for the emperor. Consort Sun clutched her belly and said through gritted teeth. The two didn't speak for a while and waited quietly. Inside Yangxin Palace Hall, Dr. Piao was taking Emperor Qin Kang's pulse. Emperor Qin Kang was suffering from pneumonitis, which was the modern era's so-called lung cancer. He had been coughing up blood for a very long time. Master Ku Hui had also gone to the palace to take a look, but he couldn't do anything about it. Dr. Piao's medical skills were only on par with Ku Hui's, but he had a secret technique that could prolong one's life. Although he couldn't snatch someone from the hands of the King of Hell, he could greatly reduce the pain and time of death. Because he only treated one person once and never a second time, Emperor Qin Kang didn't dare to let him treat him unless he was on the verge of death. Dr. Piao, how much time do we have left? After taking his pulse, Emperor Qin Kang calmly asked. If your majesty hadn't been poisoned with a tiger wolf medicine that damaged your blood essence, you would have had 4 to 5 years of life left. This commoner will try his best. At least 5 or 6 months, at most 1 or 2 years. There's no fixed number. Dr. Piao said bluntly. A tiger wolf medicine damaged my blood essence. These 2 sentences circled around the tip of Emperor Qin Kang's tongue. Although his tone was gentle and his expression was calm, his deep and serene eyes hid a chilling murderous intent. Sun Fei's medicine could unknowingly arouse his interest. Because his body was weak, he hadn't been aroused for a long time. After tasting the strength of a dragon and ferocious of a tiger several times with Sun Fei, he thought it was a sign that he had just recovered from his illness. In addition, Sun Fei was pregnant, which proved that his masculinity hadn't diminished. Because of this, he was very happy for a while and even promoted Sun Fei's position. But after learning that Sun Fei was an expert in taking pulses and medicine, he realized that the so-called strength of a dragon and ferocious of a tiger was nothing more than poison. The so-called bearing of a dragon and ferocious of a tiger was in exchange for his own life. If Sun Fei didn't know that he was ill and drugged him, it would be pardonable. But she knew that the emperor was seriously ill and was about to die, yet she still drugged him with a tiger wolf medicine just to give herself a bright future. Her actions were no less than regicide and rebellion. Emperor Qin Kang previously had high hopes for Sun Fei's child, but now he hated it. But in order to not alert the enemy, he continued to support her and promoted her to a first-rank concubine. Now that Yu Pinyin was about to return to court, his crime of conspiring with the crown prince to force the emperor to abdicate and rebel would be resolved. And in these few months, Emperor Qin Kang and the crown prince each drew up a list of officials in their hearts. The officials on the list were either loyal or traitorous, important or eliminated. It was very clear. A foul wind and a rain of blood were about to break out. Emperor Qin Kang didn't mind using Sun Fei to sharpen his butcher's knife. Therefore, when Sun Fei rushed to Yangxin Palace Hall and cried out for her innocence, he waved his sleeve and coldly said, "Give each of them 30 strokes and throw them out." Bring Zhen's decree to Sun Fei and have her kneel until the empress is satisfied. The chamberlain received the order and immediately had the imperial bodyguards capture Sun Fei and the palace maids. In the open space in front of the hall, they took off their pants and gave them 30 strokes. Then, a female official was sent to Gongquan Palace to announce the decree. What? That's impossible. I'm still pregnant with the dragon's child. The emperor can't treat me like this. You must be faking the decree. I want to see the emperor. Sun Fei was so frightened that her liver and gallbladder were about to burst. She wanted to run to Yangxin Palace Hall, but she was caught by the palace maids and forced to sit on a prayer mat in the temple hall. Because the female official didn't allow the palace maids to burn the earthenware or braziers in the temple hall, Sun Fei only knelt for a short while before she felt a throbbing pain in her stomach. In addition to her frantic state of mind, she couldn't calm down. Soon, a large patch of blood appeared on her skirt. In Cunning Palace, the empress received the report from the female official and only lightly smiled. She stared at the bleak winter scenery outside the window. It was unknown what she was thinking, but her eyes overflowed with endless sorrow. Seeing this, Yu Xiang naturally didn't dare to stay any longer. He ordered Lu Lu from Tao Hong to push a wheelchair over. After sitting down, he was about to leave. The empress personally got up to help him and asked, "Didn't you say that your leg injury has been cured? Why do you still need to sit in a wheelchair?" Replying to your highness, the journey to Shijiang is long, but because I couldn't bear the fatigue and injured my bones, I can only walk for half a day every day. For the rest of the day, I still need the maids to push me. After experiencing this internal strife and betrayal, the empress liked people like Yu Xiang more and more. In the eyes of ordinary people, Yu Xiang's actions were no different from betraying the orthodoxy and shocking. In the eyes of the empress, he was someone who valued friendship and justice and knew how to repay kindness. Not to mention being harsh, she didn't even have enough time to reward him. The empress said, "It's been hard on you," several times and told him to come to the palace often to play in the future. Only then did she order Mama Song to send him out. After Yu Xiang left the palace, he didn't leave immediately. Instead, he ordered the driver to stop the carriage on the side of the road and wait for Madame Sun to be punished. Tao Hong and Lu Lu were so shocked that they broke out in a cold sweat. Chapter 131. The strength of a royal guard staff was not something that an ordinary person could withstand. After 30 hits, Lady Sun was already half dead. She also heard that Consort Sun was currently kneeling in the temple to reflect on herself. In 24 hours, the dragon fetus would definitely be lost, and there was even a possibility of 2 lives. She had entered the palace this time for her son's marriage, but she did not expect that not only was the marriage ruined, even the pillar of the Sun family had fallen. Lady Sun simply could not understand what had happened. Her sister-in-law was clearly so favored, and the emperor had promised that as long as she gave birth to a dragon child, he would immediately make her a Qinhuang. Why did he want to kill her sister-in-law in the blink of an eye? Lady Sun was not stupid. How could she not see that the emperor and empress were working together to punish her sister-in-law? Her body hurt like it was being torn apart, but the anxiety in her heart was worse than the pain in her body. She wanted to immediately return to the Fu and have a good discussion with her son. She felt that the emperor's sudden change in attitude was not a good sign, as if the sky of the great Han dynasty was about to change. "Lady Sun, has the imperial decree for the marriage arrived? If it has, then give it to me so that I can go back and prepare the dowry." The family Shen's carriage was across the road. Yu Xiang lifted the curtain and smiled brightly. "My family's madam is seriously ill. Miss Shen, please make way." A maidservant lifted the curtain and said politely. "Seriously ill? Didn't you have your pants taken off and beaten? There are so many guards in front of the hall." Madam, you're really not embarrassed to have your lower body exposed in broad daylight. If it were me, I would be embarrassed to death. Yu Xiang did not deliberately lower his voice. This was also the main road of the palace. The people passing by were all high officials and nobles. Hearing this, they all turned to look. Lady Sun, who was already at her last breath, was so angry that she almost vomited blood. She shouted herself hoarse, go back to the Fu. Hurry. She felt like she had died if she stayed here for a moment longer. Make way, she's in a hurry to go back. Yu Xiang waved his hand at the carriage driver. The carriage driver immediately moved out of the way. He watched as the Sun family's carriage quickly disappeared among the pointing fingers. Yu Xiang put down the curtain, held a small hand warmer, and said, let's go. There is still a big show waiting for us in the Sun family. When Tao Hong heard this, he couldn't help but laugh. He urged the coachman to speed up. On the other hand, Lulu looked helpless. The two carriages arrived at the Sun residence one after the other. The gatekeeper had already received the news and sent someone to bring a bamboo bed out to receive the madam. The Lord Sun was still working at the yamen, and the Sun Mingjie was on vacation. When he heard that his mother had gone to the palace, not only did she fail to ask for the Empress's decree, she was even punished with a plank. He had been waiting at the corner gate for a long time, and a few drops of sweat could be seen on his forehead. To be punished by Emperor Qing Kong personally, and to be punished in front of so many guards in Yangxin Palace Hall, his mother must have caused a lot of trouble. Right now, concubine Sun was still kneeling in the ice-cold Buddhist temple. It was easy to predict what would happen in 24 hours. He wasn't a fool, and he had already considered the worst possible outcome. It's coming, it's coming. Quickly go and pick up madam. When the servant saw the carriage, he hurriedly carried the bamboo bed covered with thick and heavy bedding over. Mother, how are you? How is Her Highness? What exactly happened to make His Majesty so angry? Sun Mingjie held Madame Sun's hand and asked repeatedly. You are Sun Mingjie? A clear voice came from the carriage behind them. Sun Mingjie turned his head and looked back. What he saw was the beautiful figure that he had played with countless times in his dreams. At this time, that person's chin was slightly raised, and her expression was arrogant. Her bright red lips spat out hurtful words, with your appearance that is neither male nor female, you dare to covet me, the dignified Minister of Agriculture. Why don't you take a mirror and look at yourself? Do you think you're worthy? Sun Mingjie hated it when others called him a man with a feminine appearance. He glared at her with bloodshot eyes, and a murderous look appeared between his brows. Yu Xiang smiled contemptuously and waved his sleeve, don't glare. Even if you glare, I won't lose a piece of flesh. I have something here for you. Please accept it. As soon as her voice fell, she saw another carriage in front of them. Several strong servants came down carrying a huge iron cage. Inside it was a pure white swan and several hundred toads. She had gone through a lot of trouble to find so many toads in the middle of winter and even put them on the fire cage to smoke them awake. Toads were supposed to be the food of swans, but there were too many toads in the cage. They were densely packed together, and the sight was full of white, venomous lumps of flesh. Even a human would feel terrified just looking at them, not to mention the swans in the middle of them. That swan raised its long neck and let out a shrill cry. The high volume attracted all the passers-by. Everyone looked at Yu Xiang, who was leaning against the car window and smiling brightly. They all wondered, which unlucky guy messed with this devil again. In terms of temperament, all the dandy young masters in the capital couldn't compare to this family Yu, oh no, this young miss of the family Shen. Sun Mingjie stared at the iron cage, gritted his teeth, and asked, Miss Shen, what do you mean? Sending these toads to disgust me? No, I just want to tell you a truth. Yu Xiang raised her eyebrows slightly and said in a light tone, "This miss is a swan, and you are a toad on the ground. A toad wanting to eat swan meat is purely delusional." As soon as her voice fell, the servant opened the iron cage and threw it at the gate of the Sun residence. The helpless swan was freed and immediately flew into the sky. After a few long cries, it turned into a black dot and disappeared into the horizon. The toads couldn't fly, so they jumped in front of the gate of the Sun residence. Because of the poisonous mucus on their bodies, the servants of the Sun residence all avoided them. Someone knocked over the bamboo bed, causing Madame Sun to fall down and crush several toads to death. The scene was disgusting and funny. The onlookers roared with laughter. Sun Mingjie was so angry that he wanted to kill someone. If he had a sword in his hand, he would have already stabbed at Yu Xiang. After this, if anyone wanted to marry into a higher family, others would use the phrase, "a toad wanting to eat swan meat," to ridicule him. Let's not talk about this for the time being. Yu Xiang covered her mouth and chuckled. Before he could react, the carriage disappeared around the corner of the street. Sun Mingjie's face was distorted and his voice was hoarse. He shouted with all his strength, "Shen Xiang, if you offend me one day, I will make you beg for death." It was just catching a few toads to disgust people. Yu Xiang's method was no less than a child's prank in the eyes of the onlookers. However, Sun Mingjie's last declaration was a bit excessive. In addition, he always had the reputation of being an immortal young master. At this time, he revealed his sinister true colors, which surprised the crowd and made them talk about it. Those who were interested had already gone around to find out why the two families had a grudge, and they were even more disgusted with the Sun family's actions. When the news of Consort Sun's miscarriage and sudden death came from the palace, everyone realized that the Sun family's good days were over. Lord Sun was very frightened, unprecedentedly frightened. First, he received an anonymous letter in the yamen. When he opened it, he found that it was a letter written in blood, which recorded his son's heinous crimes. Before he could go home to ask, news came from the inner palace. His wife was punished by the emperor with 30 strokes of the cane for making a racket in front of the palace. Consort Sun disobeyed the empress and was punished to reflect on her mistakes. He didn't dare to send people to the palace to inquire about the news. He could only resign and go home under the strange gazes of his colleagues. As soon as he stepped into the house, he received the news of Consort Sun's miscarriage and sudden death. What the hell is going on? Why is my Sun family on the verge of extinction in just half a day? What did you do? It's not as simple as you killing a girl. Tell me quickly. Lord Sun kicked open the door and threw the letter in his son's face. Madame Sun lay on the bed and trembled. Sun Mingjie held the letter in his hand and didn't say a word. The servants left one after another, and the room fell into a dead silence. Lord Sun slumped in the armchair and said word by word, "I just got the news. Consort Sun, she has suddenly died. The little prince also died in the womb. Our Sun family was originally fine. How did it become like this? I've always followed the rules and was cautious. I've never caught the emperor's eye, let alone angering him to this extent. Since the two of you can deal with this murder case behind my back, you must be able to plan other things behind my back. Tell me, and we can think of a way together." Madame Sun buried her face in the soft pillow and sobbed. Sun Mingjie staggered to his father's side and said in a hoarse voice, "There's no other way. I'm afraid father can only jump into this fire pit with me. Either we father and son become famous and have a meteoric rise, or we'll be consigned to eternal damnation and never reincarnate." The emperor suddenly got rid of Consort Sun must have found some clues. The only thing they could do now was to inform the fourth prince and let him prepare to force the emperor to abdicate. Fortunately, the fourth prince had already infiltrated the Dragon Scale Guard and the inner palace. The crown prince had also handed over all his connections to the fourth prince, including many important officials in charge of the capital's defense. It wouldn't be difficult to surround the imperial city at lightning speed. Consort Sun's death had caused many undercurrents. Yu Xiang was currently on her way home. She even ordered Tao Hong to buy a few caddies of fried melon seeds. She ate them while looking at the scenery on the streets, looking very carefree. Wait, isn't that Chang Yafu? She pointed at the mother and daughter in splendid pavilion. Ah, yes. Didn't she hide in her hometown? Why did she come back? And her face is full of joy. Lu Lu said in surprise. Chang Yafu was trying on a jade hairpin in front of a mercury mirror. Duke Jinghua's wife accompanied her by her side. She covered her mouth and chuckled as she spoke, looking very uneasy. Something joyous must have happened at Duke Jinghua's residence. Lu Lu guessed. Chang Yafu's face is full of bashfulness. She must have found her ideal husband. Who could she marry based on her reputation? She's not like me, who has long since found herself a peerless husband. Yu Xiang muttered to herself for a moment, then suddenly laughed. Look at me, how could I forget about Yu Pinhong, who just returned to the capital? Didn't the two of them have an affair? Now that Yu Junwei has a chance of being reinstated and inheriting his title, and Yu Pinhong has a chance of returning to his official career, she immediately came looking for him. After going around in circles, this pair of adulterous man and woman finally got together. Tao Hong had always loved to inquire about gossip, so he knew a lot about the third branch's family. He asked curiously, but Yu Pinhong already got married in Shu. The other party is an ordinary village woman. He even brought her back this time. Yu Xiang sneered and said, Yu Junwei is indeed a sanctimonious hypocrite. He clearly wants to kill his daughter-in-law, but he still brought her back to show that he is a man of honor. However, how can a village woman stand up to the marquis household? At this time, if he marries another wife for his son, others won't be able to find fault with him. Looking at all the noble ladies in the capital, who would be willing to be a second wife? Only someone like Chang Yafu, who comes from a noble family but has lost her reputation, is the most suitable candidate. At that time, I exposed Chang Yafu's secret, but I didn't expect that I would end up helping a pair of lovebirds. The affairs of the world are truly unpredictable. As she spoke, she poured out the melon seed shells in her hand. Coincidentally, Chang Yafu looked up. Her beautiful eyes widened, but soon after, she chuckled and mouthed silently, Did you see that? I still became the marquis, madam. Yu Xiang coldly glanced at her, then lowered the carriage curtain and said, When brother comes back, I will immediately get married and let her know who the real marquis madam is. Chapter 132. The Lord's son had spent his entire life studying agriculture and water conservancy. He didn't have any great ambitions, but he didn't expect to marry a stupid and greedy wife, give birth to an ambitious and tyrannical son, and have a younger sister who wanted to go to the imperial palace for riches and honor. The reputation of the Sun family for 5 generations was destroyed just like that, and he was powerless to reverse the situation. He could only make the best of it. In the past, the Lord's son would just stand among the officials and listen to them. He was very calm, but today, even the hand holding the ceremonial tablet was trembling. Cold sweat seeped out of the edge of his official's hat, dripping down from his hair and earlobes. He didn't dare to wipe it off, so he could only move slightly and hide behind the Minister of Works. When he looked up, he met the eyes of the fourth prince, who was walking forward leisurely. He was stunned by the burning desire in the fourth prince's eyes. Lord Sun, are you feeling unwell? The fourth prince looked back and smiled. He was as elegant, benevolent, and generous as the rumors said. Thank you for your concern, fourth prince. I've caught a cold, but it's nothing serious. The Lord's son lowered his head, not daring to look directly at the fourth prince. The weather is cold. You should wear more clothes when you go out. The fourth prince said a few words of concern, then went to the front hall, where only the princes could stand. The fifth prince and the sixth prince also arrived. Although they smiled when they saw each other, their eyes flashed with daggers and swords. Some of the officials didn't look sideways, some were inattentive, and some were wild and restless. In short, today's court was still surging with undercurrents as usual, as if an ominous storm was brewing in the air. The arrival of Emperor Qing Kong made the already stagnant atmosphere even heavier. He said expressionlessly, "If there's something to report, then report. If there's nothing to report, then withdraw." The fifth prince and the sixth prince weren't willing to give up. They once again incited the officials to report that the crown prince should be deposed. However, they had been fighting for several months, but the crown prince was still sitting firmly on the throne. At this time, they were also a little anxious and said that the crown prince's crimes were unforgivable and should be executed, and that the two young imperial grandsons should be demoted to commoners. Kill the crown prince? Emperor Qing Kong repeated the court official's request word by word, his expression dark and gloomy. The Lord's son felt that the already cold air had condensed into grains of frost, and when he breathed it into his nostrils, it brought a piercing pain. He raised his eyes to look at the fourth prince, but all he saw was the fourth prince's straight back and his tightly clenched fists in his sleeves. He retracted his gaze and lowered his head even further. He could vaguely hear the sound of soldiers marching and the clashing of weapons, but he felt that it might be an illusion. Emperor Qing Kong sat on his throne for a long time without saying a word. He only used a strange, hair-raising gaze to size up his several grown sons. The fifth prince and the sixth prince, who were still fervently giving their speeches, gradually quieted down, not daring to say anything. Emperor Qing Kong suddenly curled his lips into a smile, and slowly turned his head to look at the fourth prince. Seeing that he was neither servile nor overbearing, indifferently standing there, the smile on his lips deepened, and the coldness in his eyes became more and more frightening. The fourth prince's tightly clenched fists made cracking sounds, and just as he was about to slowly raise them, he saw an imperial bodyguard rush into the main hall, shouting as he ran, "Reporting to your majesty, Xizjiang has won a great victory, and the victorious soldiers have already returned to the court. They are waiting at the city gate. May I ask when your majesty will enter the city?" "Good, you're finally back." Emperor Qing Kong retracted his gaze and laughed loudly, shaking his sleeves as he said, "For the time being, the court will be adjourned. My beloved officials, follow Zhen to the palace gate to welcome the meritorious officials of the great Han dynasty." If not for his ill health, he would have led the officials to the city gate to welcome them. Victorious? Returning to the court? Didn't Xizjiang lose the war and ask for peace? How could there be another great victory? The officials discussed spiritedly. A month ago, there were reports of the war, saying that the Han army had suffered a crushing defeat and had lost 2 cities. The people of Xi had already sent a message to the great Han dynasty to negotiate peace. At that time, the storm of dethroning the crown prince had caused a great deal of commotion, and the majority of the officials had advocated for peace. The emperor had also sent the head of the Li Fan Yuan to Xizjiang to discuss the contract. How could there be a victory in just a few months? Moreover, the hundreds of thousands of soldiers had set out to return to the capital, and along the way, there was not the slightest bit of information leaked out. Someone had deliberately sealed off the eyes and ears of the people in the capital. Looking at the entire great Han dynasty, who had this kind of control over the heavens and the earth? Who could play with the civil and military officials of the court, including the princes, in the palm of their hand? And what was their goal? The officials raised their heads to look at Emperor Qing Kong, who was sitting on the throne. Some of their eyes revealed shock, some of them rejoiced, and some of them had faces full of despair. Emperor Cheng Kong took in everyone's expressions one by one, and only then did he step onto the imperial carriage and head for the palace gate. The officials followed in a single file. A few of them fell down because their legs had gone soft, and they could not get up for a long time. The Lord's son's face was ashen, and his heart was like a piece of wood. He reflexively looked at the fourth prince, but he saw that he was still as calm and composed as before, as if the army's arrival was within his expectations. The hundreds of thousands of soldiers were waiting in the suburbs of the capital. Force the emperor to abdicate, force the emperor to abdicate. He was afraid that the moment he succeeded, the imperial city would be flattened by the army that had not yet lost its blood. Was the emperor's arrangement a coincidence? It was obviously not. In fact, he had seen everything, but he did not act. Either he lay in wait, or he would kill in one strike. This had always been the emperor's style of doing things. The officials who had been arguing in the court just now were now like gourds with their mouths cut off, not daring to make a sound. Yu Pinyin rode his horse and stood in front of the majestic city gate. Behind him was a black mass of soldiers that one could not see the end of. Every one of them had a solemn expression on their faces, and their hands were tightly gripping their swords and halberds. The murderous aura that came from fighting on the battlefield made it difficult for the bailiffs to breathe. Their faces were pale as they stood on their tiptoes to look in the direction of the imperial city, hoping that the eunuch who had come to deliver the edict would hurry over. In particular, the official standing under Yu Pinyin's horse was drenched in cold sweat, as if a ladle of water had been poured over him in the cold weather. After several battles, Commander Yu's murderous aura had become even stronger. His eyes were pitch black and did not have any human emotions. Instead, he looked more like a demon, or a walking weapon. When he looked down, his cold and indifferent gaze was like he was looking at an inanimate object. Why hasn't the imperial edict arrived yet? Send someone to the palace to report. The official could not take it anymore, so he grabbed someone and shouted. Yu Pinyin was as motionless as a mountain, but his horse spat out a mouthful of white air, as if it was impatient. Just at this moment, several figures suddenly appeared on the city wall, waving handkerchiefs in their hands. Who's up there? Who allowed you to let people up? Hurry and chase them away. When the official saw this, he wished he could drag those people down. This was an army returning to court, not some monkey trick for people to watch. However, the expressionless Commander Yu suddenly opened his mouth. That's this Marquis family, please make an exception for them. The bailiffs who were about to chase them away were petrified, and the official who gave the order almost pissed himself in fright. He immediately knelt down and kowtowed in apology. Yu Pinyin indifferently waved his hand. His cold gaze softened when he saw the old ancestor's aged face. He then looked at Yu Siyu, Mama Ma, and the others to the side, before finally stopping on that delicate and beautiful face. It could be seen that she had deliberately dressed up today. Her hair was piled up like clouds and combed into an exquisite cross-shaped bun. In the middle of the cross-shaped bun was a blooming peony flower, but her face was even more eye-catching than the peony flower. At this moment, half of her body was leaning out, waving the handkerchief in her hand. The smile on her face was even more beautiful than the winter sun. Yu Pinyin frowned and waved his hand. She immediately shrank back and obediently leaned against the stone railing. As if she had nowhere to express the joy in her heart, she suddenly kissed her palm and made a pushing gesture. Yu Pinyin's eyesight was outstanding, so he took in the bright red lipstick mark on her palm. His lips suddenly felt slightly warm. It felt as if she was kissing him through the air, and at the same time, it was full of love. Yu Pinyin's tight lips finally lifted, revealing a smile that was enough to charm all the women in the world. His originally handsome face was shining brightly in the winter sun. The official watched helplessly as a peerless weapon turned into a person of flesh and blood. The pressure in his heart suddenly lessened. Just at this moment, the eunuch who delivered the decree arrived. Yu Pinyin dismounted from his horse to receive the decree, and immediately led 5,000 soldiers into the capital. The rest of the soldiers remained stationed outside the city. The matriarch came down from the city wall. Her waist was no longer sore, and her legs no longer hurt. She saw that her grandson was in good condition, and all her illnesses were gone. Yu Xiang supported her and was about to return to the family hall when they saw a row of soldiers quickly running over. The person in the lead half knelt and said, reporting to old madam, "The general ordered this lowly one to take you back to Marquis Yongle." Finished speaking, he indicated for them to enter the carriage. Wasn't the Marquis household sealed? The matriarch's eyes shone with surprise. His Majesty has already issued an imperial edict. Once the general returns to the capital, the Marquis household will be unsealed. Good, good, good. Let's go. We can finally go home. The matriarch cried tears of joy and impatiently boarded the carriage. Because Emperor Chengkong had sealed off the news, no one in the capital knew that the army was about to return to court. At this time, the third branch's family was jubilantly welcoming guests. Madame Zhuo wore a bright red brocade robe and sat in the main hall. She held Chang Yafu's hand and sized him up. "I haven't seen you for a few years. Full has really blossomed like a hibiscus flower." Chang Yafu shyly lowered his head. Yu Pinhong's wife, Lu Clan, sneered, "You call this good-looking? Are you all blind? Have you never seen Miss Family Hall? That's what you call beautiful enough to cause the downfall of a city." That day, when I met her eyes on the street, I didn't even know how to walk. Someone like Miss Chang is only a so-so. Moreover, she lost her virginity before marriage. Although Madame Lu's father was only a small village head, without his care, the Yu family's third branch, who couldn't even lift a finger, would have starved to death in Shu County. Who would have thought that once they gained power, they actually planned to marry a second wife for Yu Pinhong? They were simply fooling the Lu clan like fools. If they let Chang Yafu marry into the family, the Lu clan felt that they would be killed sooner or later. It was better to strike first and gain the upper hand. As soon as he said this, the entire hall fell silent. Only when Chang Yafu's sobs could be heard did Duke Jinggua's madam explode with anger and shout, "Where did you hear this? It's simply nonsense. Why would I need to deliberately ask around? Miss Chang has a cinnabar mole on her chest. Who in the capital doesn't know this? Back then, didn't she take the initiative to take off her clothes for a man to see? Why would she be afraid of people talking about it? Look at Miss Chang's figure, it's so romantic. Who knows how she's been nourished every day? She said she went back to her hometown. Who knows which adulterer's house she's hiding in? The Lu clan was originally a rural village woman. Even the crudest words came out of her mouth. Duke Jinggua's madam was so angry that she wanted to vomit blood. She sternly scolded, "You slut, you actually dare to slander my son like this. See if I don't tear your mouth apart." Chapter 133. Madame Zhuo jumped up in fright and ran to the door in a few steps. She grabbed the servant girl who was reporting and anxiously asked, "What did you say? Say it again." "The seal on Marquis Yongle has been lifted. Old madam has returned to the Fu." It was a group of soldiers who sent her back. They went up and tore off the seal. How could that be? Didn't they say that the Marquis household was going to be awarded to our master? No, the old madam is our master's mother. If she can return to the Fu, that means our master can return to the Fu. Hurry, 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 hurry and inform our master that the imperial edict has been passed down. Have him go to the Marquis household to take a look. Madame Zhuo was first shocked, then overjoyed. She ordered the servants to run in circles. "Congratulations, younger sister. You've come a long way. Duchess Jinghua barely suppressed her anger and stepped forward with a smile. The members of the Lu clan didn't hide anymore. They lifted their skirts and rushed out, ready to see just how wealthy the legendary Marquis Yongle was, that her parents-in-law and husband still couldn't forget about it after so many years. They even shouted in their dreams that they wanted to inherit the title. Yu Junwei and his son were drinking with Duke Jinghua. When they received the news, they immediately went out to investigate. Sure enough, they saw that Marquis Yongle's main door was wide open. The seal on the door had already been reduced to pieces of scrap paper, blown away by the northern wind. Many servants and soldiers were moving things in and out, looking very busy. The matriarch held Yuxiu's hand in her left hand and Yuxiang's hand in her right hand. She was standing in front of the door, looking up at the gilded plaque hanging in the courtyard. She said in a clear voice, "In a moment, set up a ladder and wipe the dust off the plaque." "Okay." A steward immediately complied and sent someone to bring a ladder. "Mother, why did you tear off the seal? Did His Majesty's imperial edict come down?" Yu Junwei stepped forward to ask. "That's right. The imperial edict came down long ago." The matriarch took out a roll of bright yellow brocade from her sleeve. Yu Junwei's eyes shone brightly, and his breathing was heavy. He struggled to maintain a steady voice as he asked, "I can inherit the title? My position has been restored. Hong'er's scholarly rank has also been restored." "You're dreaming. Yan-er is still alive. What title did you inherit?" The old lady laughed mockingly. Without waiting for Yu Junwei to speak, Yu Miaoqi, who had come with the Lin clan to watch the show, hurriedly asked, "What do you mean?" Yu Xiu sneered, "Are you deaf? My big brother is not dead. How can the position of Marquis Yongle be given to others? Not only did he not die, but he also flattened the Western imperial court and made a great contribution." Her brother had already entered the palace to meet the emperor and would return home in the evening. Today, the mansion is holding a family banquet to celebrate Big Brother's birthday. "I hope you all will come," Yu Xiang said with a smile. Yu Junwei, Yu Miaoqi, and the others were confused and disoriented by their words, and they felt a chill run down their spines. Yu Pinyin didn't die, so the charges of conspiring with the enemy and plotting a rebellion that had been placed on his head would naturally be dispelled, and his title of nobility would no longer be a problem. That wasn't all. When he was free, everyone who had framed him would receive his most cruel and merciless revenge, just like in the past. Yu Junwei and the others only had to think about it for a moment to feel their liver and guts being torn apart. Yu Miaoqi and the Lin clan unconsciously hugged each other, their trembling bodies revealing the fear in their hearts. The old lady pinched her granddaughter's wrist and sneered, "What family banquet? Apart from the three of us, who else is a family? Ma, go inform the clan elders. I want to make the decision for Yan-er to sever his mother-son relationship with the Lin clan and his sibling relationship with Yu Miaoqi. From now on, we will go our separate ways and have nothing to do with each other." When Yu Xiang heard this, he inwardly applauded. Even Yu Xiu felt that the old ancestor was decisive and that this was how it should be. "Mother, you can't. Yan-er fell from my stomach." The Lin clan screamed mournfully, but Yu Miaoqi didn't make a sound. She knew that she had already gone too far. Not only did she hide the evidence of her crimes in Yu Pinyin's study, she also instructed the Lin clan to help the third branch seize their titles. Her crimes were unforgivable. Even if she had a glib tongue and the ability to distort black and white, the old lady would never believe her again. The third branch's title was gone. Not only that, they would probably have to bear the crime of framing a court official. No, she almost forgot. The ultimate goal of framing Yu Pinyin was to topple the crown prince and help the fourth prince seize the throne. Now that Yu Pinyin had returned to the capital victoriously, the crown prince was naturally safe. The emperor, who had orchestrated all of this, probably knew everything. However, he had been holding back the entire time. He probably wanted to use this incident to clean up the court. Everyone who had participated in this incident couldn't escape. Not a single person could escape. And if she dissolved her sibling relationship with Yupinyan, just the crime of framing a court official would be enough to sentence her to death by 1,000 cuts. Yupinyan was never stingy with his own hands when it came to those who provoked him. 3,600 cuts, he wouldn't let the other person die until the last cut was made. His heart was just that ruthless. The more Yu Miaoqi thought about it, the heavier the fear and despair in her heart. It was so heavy that she wanted to scream on the spot. She bit the tip of her tongue and ordered herself to remain calm. She told herself that her benefactor was still here. He was so wise and skilled in strategizing. He would definitely have a way to turn the situation around. She suddenly remembered the scene of her wearing the phoenix robe. Only then did her panicked heart slowly calm down. When Yupinyan led the army through the streets, many of the Yu family's clansmen saw him. In the past, the clansmen had been bribed by the third branch to help the third branch fight for the title and wantonly bully the orphans and widows. After Yupinyan gained power, he took revenge on them one by one. The remaining clansmen didn't receive any help from him. As a result, the clansmen were quite critical of him. If it weren't for his monstrous power, he would have been expelled from the clan long ago. Previously, when Yupinyan was in trouble and the third branch had a chance to rise, the clansmen rushed to spread the news. They were greatly relieved and helped the third branch establish relations. They only hoped that after the third branch had a meteoric rise, they would also be able to get a share of the profits. Now that they saw that not only did Yupinyan not die, he even led 1,000,000 soldiers to victory and returned to the court. The shock in their hearts was simply indescribable. In order to appease Yupinyan, they had to do something quickly. The clansmen all thought to themselves. Because of this, when the matriarch sent someone to invite them, the clan elders immediately rushed to the ancestral hall. Yen has always been loyal and devoted to the emperor. How could he collude with the enemy to usurp the throne? Now that he has destroyed the western continent and pacified the chaos in Xinjiang, his contributions have been seen by the emperor. As early as 10 days ago, he had already issued an imperial edict to return Marquis Yongle to Yandere. Clan elders, please take a look. The matriarch spread out the bright yellow brocade on the table. The clan elders hurriedly knelt down and said, "Long live the emperor." Although I don't have any concrete evidence, I know very well who put the secret letter in Yandere's study. The matriarch coldly glanced at Yu Miaoqi and continued, "The Marquis family is in dire straits. As a family, we should help each other and support each other. However, the family is unfortunate. There are 2 traitors who are worse than beasts. They actually helped an outsider to slander and frame Yandere." At that time, the news of Yandere's defeat and death had already spread. It is said that the dead should be respected. One of them is Yandere's younger sister, and the other is Yandere's biological mother. However, for the sake of glory, splendor and wealth, they intended to step on Yandere's bones to ascend. Their conduct is simply intolerable. Let me ask everyone, in all these years, have you ever seen such heartless and unscrupulous people? The clan members present were all ashamed by the matriarch's question. Even if the Lin clan and Yu Miaoqi were helping the third branch, Yu Junwei and the others still felt that such people were worse than beasts, just as the matriarch said. They had long been distracted by the news of Yupinyan's return to the capital. They only wanted to break up the clan meeting as soon as possible, then pack up their things and escape to the land of Shu. However, they were detained on the ground by the soldiers brought by the matriarch and could not move. Ordinary people could not understand the feeling of burning with anxiety. Yu Miaoqi and the members of the Lin clan knelt down in the hall. One of them had a numb expression, while the other was crying so hard that she almost fainted. The matriarch took a sip of ginseng tea and continued, I've thought about it over and over again. Such heartless and unscrupulous people can't stay in the family. Sooner or later, they will cause our family to be ruined. Therefore, I summoned all the clan elders to be witnesses and sever all ties with them. If you don't agree, when His Majesty starts to clean up the imperial court, he will inevitably find them and the third branch. You have been in close contact with them recently, so you may be implicated and end up with your head separated from your bodies. The last sentence was like a bolt of lightning that struck the clan members' heads. Before the clan elders could speak, someone shouted, sever ties, quickly sever ties. Not only do we have to sever ties with these two, we also have to sever ties with the third branch. Exterminate the clan, we must exterminate the clan. Otherwise, when His Majesty investigates, it will be a great crime that will result in the execution of 9 generations of the clan. The clan elders were drenched in cold sweat and hurriedly nodded. The third branch's entire family was paralyzed on the ground like mud. Only the members of the Lu clan broke free from the soldier's grip and shouted themselves hoarse, I want to divorce Yu Pinhong. He wants to divorce his wife and remarry, so I want to divorce. Old madam, please uphold justice for me. Although she was coarse, she was a tactful person. As soon as she knelt at the feet of the matriarch, who had the most authority. The matriarch closed her eyes and ignored her. On the other hand, Yu Xiang found it quite interesting and smiled, all right, I'll let you two divorce. Get up. This is my family's matter. What right do you have to make the decision? Yu Pinhong asked, flustered and exasperated. Just because I'm the knife and you're the fish on the chopping block. Just because I'm sitting here and you're lying there. Just because I'm the ruler and you're the sinner. Is that enough? Yu Xiang stroked her freshly applied nail polish, her tone light and unhurried. Yu Pinhong was mute. His hands were fiercely twisted by the soldiers. It was so painful that he couldn't even cry out. The members of the Lu clan were overjoyed and repeatedly kowtowed to Yu Xiang. By the time she quietly hid in the crowd, the clan elders had already finished writing the divorce papers. They ordered all the clan members to put their handprints on the papers and send them to the Yamen for review. If the Yamen passed the review and prepared a file, it would be posted on the bulletin board for everyone in the capital to see. From then on, Yu Miaoqi, the Lin clan, and the third branch would no longer have anything to do with the clan. Yu Pinyin had no way of knowing what was going on at home. At this time, he was kneeling in front of the palace hall to report to Emperor Chengkong. Emperor Chengkong praised the generals. When they stood up and retreated to the side, he suddenly spoke with a cold expression, one word at a time, colluding with foreign enemies, plotting to usurp the throne, treason and heresy. Where did these crimes come from? It's a bunch of nonsense. Someone, go invite the crown prince and the prime minister. Invite all the suspended officials to come to the palace hall. Zhen wants to properly clean up this muddy court. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.